Chapter 36. A pack of wolves during the night. Jian Shen and Tai Ta sat under a tree cultivating. The torch by their side had long since burned out, and in a tree branch 5 or 6 meters above them, was Liang Xiaolu. She nervously looked around whenever she heard the howl of a magical beast in the night. She wasn't able to sleep at all. Liang Xiaoli's bright eyes looked down at the cultivating pair, Jian Shen and Tai Ta, as if she was monitoring them. In her eyes, this was a matter of life or death. She did not want to see the two people she had found, after a long time of searching, to abandon her and lose her only type of protection. At that moment, a light breeze blew through the forest and through the tall grass. Meanwhile, the cross-legged Jian Shen suddenly opened his eyes. Immediately, his eyes grew bright as he stared deep into the tall grass, before standing up onto the ground with the iron rod in his hand. Liang Xiaolu was confused as she watched Jian Shen stand up. Not knowing what was happening, her heart was suddenly very agitated. "Hey, what's happening?" Liang Xiaolu whispered carefully. In this situation, she didn't dare use a loud voice to speak, for fear of attracting another magical beast. Jian Shen didn't answer her and instead turned to the still cultivating Tai Ta. "Tai Ta, wake up, some magical beasts are attacking." "Ah, what did you say? Magical beasts are attacking?" Liang Xiaolu became frightened, her face instantly draining of color. Thinking about what was about to happen, her whole body began to shake in fear. While Tai Ta was cultivating, he didn't dare immerse himself completely, so he still remained on guard while cultivating. Thus, when Jian Shen called for him, Tai Ta immediately woke from his cultivation state and stood up with his battle-axe rested against his shoulder. "Changyang Xiang Tian, where are the monsters?" he asked as he looked around. He couldn't see any footprints around them, or even hear a single sound. Jian Shen slowly turned his head as he looked around. "Tai Ta, this time, be careful. This time it isn't a single magical beast, but a group of them." "A group?" Tai Ta's face immediately changed from careless to surprise, then it hardened into a ready expression. "Ah. What? A group? It can't be. Hey guys, please don't scare me like that." Hiding in the trees, Liang Xiaolu pleaded with them. She would have rather heard a threat from Jian Shen than this. Jian Shen's eyebrows knitted together before lightly commanding the crying Liang Xiaolu, "Could you please be quiet? Do you want to attract magical beasts from all over?" Jian Shen's command proved to be extremely useful, as Liang Xiaolu immediately used her hand to clamp her mouth shut to make sure she didn't say anything. "Changyang Xiang Tian, how many magical beasts do you think there are?" Tai Ta asked. "A lot, 10 at the very least. They're all prepared to attack and already have us surrounded." Jian Shen's face was very grave. Tai Ta's expression grew hard as he heard Jian Shen. If it was just one magical beast, he wouldn't have been worried. 3 magical beasts and the both of them combined could take them on. But now that there were at least 10 of them, Tai Ta didn't dare to have a swelled head now. When Liang Xiaolu had heard Jian Shen, her already pale face had turned even paler, and her mind was racked with fear. Only one thought was occurring in her head: it's over, we're screwed. We're not going to survive this. The tall grass began to sway as a cyan-colored light appeared in front of them. There was one in every direction, with no less than 50 points of origin. As Jian Shen and Tai Ta looked on amazed, they realized the bright spots of light were actually the eyes of magical beasts, and there were at the very least 20 of them. "This is a Class 1 magical beast blue wolf. Tai Ta, if you want to live, hurry and climb up a tree now," Jian Shen said as he looked at the 20 blue wolves from all 4 directions. Tai Ta glared in anger before brandishing his battle-axe. With a heroic voice he said, "Don't worry. Changyang Xiang Tian, there are only 20 Class 1 magical beasts. I guarantee they won't take us down." The moment she heard that there were 20 wolves invading, Liang Xiaolu was practically scared to death. At this time, even if she believed in Jian Shen's and Tai Ta's strengths before, she would never believe that their strengths would be able to beat 20 magical beasts, as they hadn't even reached sainthood yet. Unless one of the school teachers were to come save them now, they wouldn't be able to escape alive. "Teacher, where are you?" Please come save us. Liang Shaola looked around in all directions as she pleaded for a teacher to come. She could only trust that the teachers would come to save them now, but it was a shame that there were so many magical beasts, so she was too scared to cry out too loudly. Just in case the magical beasts focused on her. The 20 blue wolves slowly walked towards Jian Chen and Tai Ta, their oily gazes staring attentively at them. It was only when their distance was less than 5 meters away that they stopped moving. Jian Chen and Tai Ta grabbed onto their respective weapons. Although they were surrounded by 20 magical beasts, neither of the two had a single expression of fear. Aoo. Suddenly, a blue wolf started to cry out into the sky. Immediately afterwards, the 20 wolves surrounding them started to howl as well. Their howls filled the air as they began to overlap with each other, before turning into a large sound wave that targeted a wide area. Hearing the wolves howl, Liang Shaoli's entire body slipped. Her body fell to the ground as she started to tremble. At this point, her face was entirely drained of blood, and had become a deathly pale shade. 5 kilometers away from Jianchen, a middle-aged male dropped down onto a tree branch. When he heard the howls, his face changed. His previously closed eyes opened as he stared off towards the direction of the sound. Not good, that's a pack of blue wolves. Judging by the howls, there are at least 10 of them. It looks like someone has met up with danger then. The middle-aged man's face grew solemn as his hands touched the tree he was standing on. He jumped down from the tree before sprinting off towards the direction of the howls without stopping. I hope that I can make it. The middle-aged man was anxious, but he was already going at the fastest speed he could possibly go at. The magical beasts in the second area weren't that strong, but the opponents Jian Chen and Tai Ta were facing were Class 1 magical beast blue wolves. Their chances of success weren't looking well. At the same time, in 3 different places, 3 different people all heard the yell before putting down whatever was in their hands and quickly started to run towards the howl. The wolves' howl was the signal for the wolves to attack, as the 20 wolves suddenly rushed at Jian Chen and Tai Ta. Go die. Tai Ta snarled as he brought his battle axe up in preparation to strike. He swiped at a nearby wolf with his axe, slamming the axe into its stomach. The wolf cried out with an ear-piercing shriek. Pung! The blue wolf that charged at Tai Ta was immediately cut down by his battle-axe's powerful attack, and it now sported a giant wound on its body. The wolf was sent flying away from the mighty swing. Despite it being a Class 1 magical beast, it was no match for Tai Ta's strength. Tai Ta brandished his 100-pound battle-axe with ease as if it wasn't heavy at all. Whenever a blue wolf approached, he would send it flying away. Thus, any wolf that got too close to him was sent flying, with a new wound on its body. However, the skin of a blue wolf was tough, so even Tai Ta couldn't kill one with ease. As the wolves approached him at the same time, Jian Chen's eyes instantly grew cold as he dashed forward. In a flash, he brought the sharpened iron rod through the throat of a nearby wolf. Pooh! With some resistance, the iron rod finally pierced through the wolf's hide and bore through the wolf's throat. He took out the rod and tilted his body to the side to dodge the attack of another wolf who jumped at him. The wolf who had its throat pierced by Jian Chen fell helplessly to the ground, as its 4 legs spasmed in its final death throes. It couldn't stand up on its legs no matter how much it tried, as bright red blood leaked out from its wound. The throat was the weak point for almost every single living thing, and magical beasts were no exception. Right now, since the blue wolf had its throat skewered, its life was quickly fading. Even though it was trying to avoid the temptation of death, its struggle would not last long. Jian Chen relied on the nimbleness of his body to weave in and out of the pack of wolves, and he used his iron rod to leave behind stab wounds wherever he attacked. Despite being surrounded by 10 wolves, Jian Chen had used his strange but unpredictable style of movement to dodge with ease. The sharp teeth and the claws of the wolves couldn't touch him at all, and whenever it had seemed like the wolves would be able to get him, Jian Chen moved out of the way just in time. The battle hadn't even lasted for more than a few deep breaths before 3 of the wolves had their throats pierced by Jian Chen. As the wolves lost blood, they stumbled to the ground in a final struggle to live, but after one final breath, they died on the ground. Many of the wolves had suffered from multiple wounds, but none of them were fatal, and were focused on the joints of the beasts. Jianshan proceeded to travel in between the wolves as the iron rod in his hand continued to stab at them. Not only were his movements swift, but there was a certain grace to them. It was almost as if he was dancing instead of fighting for his life. On the other side, Tai Ta let loose a snarl and brought his 100-pound battle-axe down through the air, producing an after-image thanks to the speed. The few wolves surrounding him were continuously sent flying through the air with exceptionally terrifying wounds. Although the wounds were from Tai Ta's sharp battle-axe, to the blue wolves, these injuries would not threaten their lives at all. Although Tai Ta was looking quite powerful and majestic at this moment, he was not invincible. And with Jian Chen's success so far, Tai Ta's own achievements were nothing much. After all, ever since the start of the battle, Tai Ta had not yet been able to kill a single blue wolf. Chapter 37, Teacher's Shock. A mere few seconds passed. Another wolf died by Jian Chen's hands, while countless others were being injured. The cowering Liang Shaola didn't hear Tai Ta's or Jian Chen's screams of pain at all. All she could hear was the howling of the blue wolves mixed in with whimpers. Because of her curiosity, she fought her fear and looked down on the ground, and her eyes grew wide in shock. She couldn't believe that Jian Chen and Tai Ta were still fighting the blue wolves, and she was shocked speechless. Every single swing from Tai Ta's axe was capable of smashing a wolf into the air with ease. No wolf was able to get close to him because of that, and most of the blue wolves were covered with frightening wounds that had covered their entire bodies with blood. Jian Chen, on the other hand, was moving rapidly between the wolves and attacking them from every direction. Whenever he thrusted his iron rod forward, another wolf would be riddled with wounds. His movements were too fast for Liang Shaola to follow. The only thing she could see was a constant blurs. She had never experienced such a hair-raising bloody spectacle like the one below, but on the outside, her face had already started to regain some color. However, her body had not yet stopped trembling. After all, it was her first time seeing such a bloody mess, and no matter who it was, a person wouldn't be able to take in a sight like this easily their first time. At that moment, a blue wolf took advantage of Tai Ta's lack of attention, and jumped at his shoulder. Using its strong teeth, it bit deeply down on his shoulder and blood started to flow freely from the wound. The acute pain caused Tai Ta's face to darken as he looked at the blue wolf biting at his shoulder. Tai Ta's eye blinked in pain as he looked at the blue wolf with a fierce glare. Dropping his battle-axe, his right hand grabbed onto the wolf's head, and with his monstrous strength, he ripped the wolf off his shoulder, leaving behind deep incisions in his skin. Tai Ta grabbed onto the wolf's snout with both hands, and the veins in his arms swelled up with his muscles. With a furious roar, his hands gripped onto the yelping wolf and tore its head from its body. At the same time, blood splattered everywhere onto Tai Ta, dyeing him blood red. Tai Ta's act of strength caused the surrounding wolves to cower in fear, as they watched Tai Ta hold onto the two halves of the wolf's carcass. But Tai Ta didn't plan to let the wolves get away. Dropping the body, he picked up his battle-axe and sliced down onto another wolf's head. The wolf tilted its head and dodged Tai Ta's battle-axe. Bringing its head up towards the sky, it let out a great howl before launching itself at him. Hearing the howl, all of the wolves had their fear dispelled, as they instantly charged at Tai Ta. Tai Ta sent a kick towards the abdomen of a wolf, sending it flying through the air. The sharp blade of his battle-axe cut into the neck of the wolf. Leaving behind a trail of blood, the wolf flew backwards like a rocket. After his battle-axe had chopped through the head of a wolf, Tai Ta stopped where he stood. He brandished his battle-axe in a menacing way for the other wolves to see. Pung! A wolf was too late in dodging and was hit by Tai Ta's battle-axe. The wolf was split in two as it gave one last final howl. After being injured, it looked as if Tai Ta became even stronger. In a flash, he had already killed 2 wolves. Jian Chen, on the other hand, was still wrestling fiercely with the wolves. Suddenly, a wolf jumped from above, down onto Jian Chen. Jian Chen immediately turned around and glared at the incoming wolf with his flashing eyes. The iron rod in his hand shot forth like lightning and stabbed deep into the wolf's abdomen, piercing its heart. The moment he felt the rod stop, he immediately pulled it out and then moved away from his position. The moment he left from his spot, the group of blue wolves immediately lunged at him. The wolf that had been skewered in the heart whimpered as it gave its final breath, and fell down to the ground, spasming before finally becoming still. The battle persisted for some time, and as time passed, the amount of blue wolves that had died by the hands of Jian Chen and Tai Ta grew larger and larger. Gradually, the pressure on the two boys reduced, as the number of blue wolves dwindled. Jian Chen pulled out his iron rod from another wolf's throat. He had already killed over 10 blue wolves, yet his clothes were relatively unstained by the blood. Jian Chen looked to Tai Ta only to see 7 or 8 blue wolves left. However, each of the 8 wolves were already bloody, as if they had been bathed in blood. His already ragged clothing was becoming even worse, and was almost like a strip of cloth now. His clothes were no longer protecting his body, and instead revealed his chest underneath. Even the trousers had rips in parts, with blood dripping from the wounds beneath it. Without any hesitation, Jian Chen rushed towards Tai Ta and immediately started to fight off the 8 wolves with his iron rod. Because Tai Ta had gave the wolves many heavy injuries in a long battle, the wolves were all exhausted beyond relief, so Jian Chen's job was relatively easy. Without expending much energy, he ended their lives by accurately piercing each of the wolves' throats. After the invasion of the pack of wolves, even Jian Chen couldn't help but breathe hard. Even though he was not weak at all, he had used up the majority of his energy to fight against the pack of wolves. Tai Ta let out a long sigh as he looked at the pile of dead bodies around him. On his face was a happy smile. Although they had just fought a long and hard battle, he didn't show a single trace of exhaustion. Instead, his fighting spirit was awakened. Changyang Xiang Tian, let's kill the rest of the Class 1 magical beasts. Tai Ta laughed. In his lifetime, he had never killed a Class 1 magical beast before, so it was natural that he was excited. Jian Chen smiled as well before looking at the wounds on Tai Ta. You're hurt, how bad is it? Tai Ta looked down on his body to inspect his wounds before saying, it's no problem. Although the bites hurt, they're mostly superficial wounds. Hee, my skin has been thick since I was small, so regular beasts could never bite me before. Jian nodded his head in understanding with a thoughtful face. He knew about Tai Ta's strength and vitality firsthand. Tai Ta was even stronger than a steel bar, so the blue wolves must have been ferocious to bite through his skin. Ah, that's right, Changyang Xiang Tian, are you hurt? Tai Ta asked with concern as he looked at Jian Chen. Jian Chen shook his head, don't worry, the wolves didn't hurt me at all. He shifted his stare to the tall grass and said loudly, haven't you seen enough? How long do you plan on hiding there? Hearing Jian Chen, Tai Ta went blank for a second as he was puzzled by what Jian Chen was saying. But he soon figured it out and immediately grabbed onto his battle axe with both his hands. Who's hiding over? Hurry up and come out, otherwise I'll chop you in half. Tai Ta yelled. As Tai Ta spoke, the tall grass rustled before them as 4 figures leapt out in front of Tai Ta and Jian Chen. Seeing the 4 shadows jump out, Tai Ta immediately went on the defensive, while Jian Chen didn't move a muscle except for a small smile on his face. Although they couldn't see the appearances of the 4 due to the darkness, but Jian Chen had long since guessed their identities. When the 4 shadows reached 2 meters away from Jian Chen, they suddenly stopped. Jian Chen could finally see their faces clearly. 2 of them were middle-aged men while there was an elder and a 30-year-old female. All 4 of them had a look of astonishment and were stupefied as if they saw an inconceivable event. Honorable teachers, so it was you. Tai Ta finally recognized the 4 people and cried out in surprise. The 4 people quickly regained their composure, but their eyes still revealed traces of shock. Changyang Xiang Tian, no wonder there are rumors about you being able to beat a saint. I didn't think too much about it at first, but after seeing this, the rumors have to have some sort of truth to them. For a single person to use a corroded iron rod to kill dozens of Class 1 magical beasts, even saints who condense their saint weapons wouldn't be able to replicate this easily. The elder said with a laugh as he praised Jian Chen. Jian Chen laughed and said, honored teacher gives this one too much praise. My strength isn't as strong as you think. the wolves may have been Class 1 magical beasts, but their attack power wasn't that high. If I had came across a stronger Class 1 magical beast, then I'm afraid I would have struggled a lot more. Hearing this, the elder looked at Jianshan appreciatively before looking at Tai Ta with a laugh. Tai Ta, your strength is also very strong. It's no wonder the headmaster noticed you and took you in as an apprentice. Tia Ta scratched his head with a modest smile, but he didn't know what to say in response to that. Elder Yun, it would appear that we came here for nothing. These two are absolutely abnormal in strength. Nothing in the second region would be a match for them, said the 30-year-old woman. The other three bitterly smiled as they listened to her. When they had heard the howls of the wolves, they naturally knew that a student was in danger. For that reason alone they had all rushed towards the howls at the fastest speed possible to rescue them. On the way, each one of them prayed that the students would be able to hold on for as long as possible, but when they had arrived, they were subjected to an inconceivable sight. Two students who weren't at the saint level had been able to fend off 20 or so blue wolves without trouble. In the end, they had been able to slaughter all 20 of them, and none of the four could believe their eyes at this end result. Chapter 38, Liang Xiao Lu. Oh, by the way, Changyang Xiang Tian, how did you detect us? A middle-aged man asked, his tone full of curiosity. The other three teachers were curious to know as well as they stared at Jianshan. The four of them were extremely interested in knowing how they were detected while hiding in the tall grass because they had not made a single sound or made any movement, so there was no way that they would have been noticed by Jianshan. Jianshan laughed and said, I had found out the moment the honorable teachers arrived. What? You found out the moment we arrived? How is that possible? The woman cried out in disbelief. The other three people couldn't believe what Jianshan said either. Jianshan opened his mouth. While I was fighting the pack of wolves, I was still paying attention to my surroundings. Otherwise, we might have been subjected to random attacks from someone else. How would I dare lose track of what was happening around me at such a crucial point? Hearing this, the four teachers nodded, approving of what Jianshan had just said. Jianshan continued to explain, the honorable teachers didn't make a single sound at all, but when you arrived I saw a bunch of obvious movements, so I found out since the very beginning. Hearing this, the four people realized their mistakes as the elder sighed in admiration. Amazing, just amazing. Changyang Xiang Tian, I really have no other choice but to admire you. And to think that when I was your age, I was nowhere near the level you are now. The elder then paused before saying, since you students aren't in any danger, then we'll take our leave now. After all, there are still students to save. Although the elder had said that, he looked as if he was reluctant to leave. Please wait. Jianshan suddenly cried out towards the four teachers. Pointing at Liang Xiaolu who was still hiding in the tree, he said, Honored teacher, could you please help escort this student out? She doesn't have the courage to stay here any longer. The teacher frowned as he thought about it. This won't be a problem, but even if she hands over 2 Class 1 monster cores, this will still be considered as a loss. After all, she didn't stay here for all 3 days. No, I won't leave, I'll definitely stay here for all 3 days. Liang Xiaolu said from the treetop as she dropped 5 or 6 meters down onto the ground. In one long stride she went over to where Jianshan was. Hey, these 4 teachers can take you out of this forest so you won't have to worry about magical beasts hurting you. Why don't you want to go home? Tai Ta was rather discontent, since Liang Xiaolu was really too cowardly. The moment she saw a magical beast she cried out loud. This really annoyed Tia Ta. Liang Xiaolu looked at Tai Ta timidly and whispered, I don't want to go. Could it be you're no longer afraid of magical beasts? Tai Ta asked curiously. I am. So you're scared after all, then why don't you want to get out of here? Because you two are still here. With such a straightforward answer, Tai Ta couldn't find a response. Jianshan looked at Liang Xiaolu helplessly before trying to persuade her. Liang Xiaolu, you should go with the teachers. The magical beasts in this forest are many, and so there's no guarantee that we can protect you. Liang Xiaoli's face became miserable as she realized that she would need to depend on Jianshan. Imploring, she said, "Senior, please let me go with you. This was my first time seeing a magical beast and the first time I've been here. That's why I was scared initially. But I guarantee you, the next time we come across a magical beast, I won't cry out loud." After experiencing Jian Chen's and Tai Ta's strengths, Liang Shaolu wouldn't have to worry about getting into any trouble with those two around. Plus, Liang Shaolu had clearly that the four teachers all said that the second region of the forest had nothing that they couldn't handle. So with such good protection, there was no way she would give up that easily. Jian Chen suddenly felt a headache coming. Liang Shaolu was a pampered noble since birth, so she would definitely be a burden to them. When they battled any magical beasts in the future, they would have to look after her as well. Changyang Xiang Tian, with you and Tai Ta, there are no magical beasts in the second region that can pose a threat to you. So you might as well take her along. Students should look out for one another. And besides, for you too, this shouldn't even be considered a test anymore. Laughed the middle-aged woman. Jian Chen inwardly sighed in exasperation. Since even the teachers wanted Liang Shaolu to tag along, he couldn't find any reasons to object. Although Jian Chen was giving in, Tai Ta was still not satisfied, but he didn't say anything. After this first day, he had already started to see Jian Chen as the pillar of the team. Whatever his decision was, Tai Ta would not object to it. Jian Chen's mind was better at strategy and he had more experience dealing with beasts than Tai Ta's. So it could be said that no matter what, Tai Ta would concede to Jian Chen. After the four teachers left, Jian Chen and Tai Ta didn't pay attention to Liang Shaolu and instead went to the dead bodies of the blue wolves. Since it was over 20 Class 1 monster cores, they wouldn't dare to squander this. Because the monster cores of the blue wolves were in their heads, Tai Ta and Jian Chen were trying to find a way to extract them. They definitely needed to strike and break at the part of the head where the monster core was, so Liang Shaoli's face went pale as she observed them. Perhaps Liang Shaolu had changed only slightly. It was almost as if she no longer felt out of her league. With great difficulty, she was able to quell the cowardly nature within her, as she diligently watched Jian Chen and Tai Ta work at extracting the cores. It was almost as if she was learning from the experience. The night passed quickly and peacefully after the initial Blue Wolves raid. As the dawn sun slowly rose over the edge of the horizon, the cross-legged Jian Chen finished his cultivation and stood up to stretch. Just as Jian Chen stood up, he heard Tai Ta start to awaken as well. He followed Jian Chen up, and although the two were in the middle of cultivating, they were still aware of their surroundings. They had put up a guard while cultivating, and as long as the wind blew through the tall grass, then the pair would be able to track anyone. Tai Ta, go find some dry branches for the fire. I'll go fetch the magical beast meat. It's about time we prepare some breakfast, Jian Chen said. Oh. Without any objects, Tai Ta turned around and entered the forest to search for some dry firewood. Soon after, Tai Ta carried over a pile of dry firewood. At the same time, Jian Chen had prepared a huge chunk of bloody magical beast meat from the blue wolves that had been killed by them last night. Since there were no sources of water in the area, the magical beast meat was not washed. Instead, it was directly skewered with some sticks, and was placed above the bonfire to begin roasting. Not long after, the roasted magical beast meat began to emit a fragrant aroma. Although it did not have any spices, the quality of the magical beast meat was originally high. Moreover, the higher the class of the magical beast, the more delicious its meat would taste, and the more beneficial it was to the body. It was said that a Class 5 magical beast's meat could even boost one's strength. Perhaps because she could smell the magical beast meat's fragrance, Liang Shaolu awoke from her nap on top of the tree, and jumped down. The 5 to 6 meter height was nothing to Liang Shaolu, who had reached the 8th Saint Force layer. Wah, it smells so good. Liang Shaolu bounced over to the bonfire, and seeing the golden magical beast meat dripping in rich oils, she could not help but swallow hard. Although she had eaten many exotic delicacies, she had never eaten wild game like this before. After all, eating the same type of meat for so long, one would obviously think of anything else as more appetizing, even if it was just some cabbage. Tai Ta shot a dissatisfied glance at Liang Shaolu, and murmured in a quiet voice, last night you were crying so loudly, now you've forgotten about it all so quickly. I hope that when we encounter more magical beasts later, you won't start wailing again. Tai Ta's voice was extremely soft and unclear. Most likely, aside from himself, nobody would have been able to clearly hear what he had whispered, even Jian Chen. Liang Shaolu looked at Tai Ta in curiosity. Tai Ta, what are you saying? Last night, the 4 teachers had called out Jian Chen's and Tai Ta's names, so Liang Shaolu had already learned their identities. Nothing. Tai Ta waved his hands as if he was feeling guilty for something. Liang Shaolu didn't pay any mind to it. She gazed at Jian Chen and Tai Ta and smiled. No wonder you two are so powerful that you can kill 20 Class 1 magical beasts. It turns out that you two are actually Tai Ta and Changyang Xiang Tian. The fact that I was able to meet you two was really great luck. The current Liang Shaolu seemed to be an entirely different person from the person yesterday evening. After only a single night, she seemed to already have pushed yesterday's events to the back of her mind. Now, her face didn't show a single trace of fear and dread from the thought of magical beasts. Jian Chen lifted the well-cooked magical beast meat, and then ripped of a section, throwing it over to Liang Shaolu, asking, "There are a lot of magical beasts in this forest. Moreover, if we don't stay for 3 more days, then we definitely cannot leave. Aren't you afraid?" Liang Shaolu accepted the piece of magical beast meat, and while she lightly chewed it, she said, "Although I'm still scared, I believe that I will eventually get used to it. In addition, the 2 of you are not much older than me, yet you both faced those fierce blue wolves last night without a trace of fear. The 2 of you even managed to slaughter all of them. This is much more impressive than those other boys." Those boys were so useless. The 5 of them together couldn't defeat a single magical beast. In the end, their incompetence forced me to get separated from my sisters. Liang Shaolu suddenly stood up, and loudly declared, "I've decided now. I will definitely use these next 2 days to properly learn from you 2 seniors." Hearing this, Jian Chen inwardly nodded to himself. Liang Shaoli's statement had already gained Jian Chen's approval. Although she was timid, and was extremely afraid of magical beasts, that wasn't important. The most important factor was she was willing to change her ways, and to learn more. After all, nobody was born with the ability to do and understand everything. All knowledge retained is a result of one going out to learn it. Of course, Jian Chen was an exception. On the other hand, Liang Shaolu was born as the eldest daughter in a noble household. She had been spoiled since she was young, and had grown up in a sheltered environment. Obviously, she had never experienced any hardships. Thus, it was to be expected that she would inevitably be frightened during her first encounter with a savage magical beast. After all, this was the equivalent to an average person meeting a ghost for the first time. Anyone would feel fear. Chapter 39, Plans. After eating breakfast, Jian Chen and Tai Ta both grabbed their respective weapons before continuing on with their journey. However, trailing behind them was the dainty Liang Shaolu, who was empty-handed. She looked around herself carefully due to her own weapon being long gone after she had been separated from her group and chased through the forest. Tai Ta lifted his battle axe. His clothes were already swapped out. This time, he was wearing blue wolf leather along with some grassroot to hold it together. His academy uniform was long since torn apart from yesterday's battle to the point where he couldn't wear it anymore. In the blink of an eye, another day came and went. By looking at the profits, they weren't as good as the first day, but they weren't bad either. In total, they had killed 70 magical beasts, making Liang Shaolu feel shocked. On this second day, Liang Shaolu went through a major change. Ever since the spectacle with the blue wolves, her entire personality had transformed. At the very least, whenever she saw a magical beast, she wouldn't scream in terror anymore. And whenever Tai Ta and Jian Chen would slaughter any enemy magical beast, she didn't even flinch at the sight of the blood. She was slowly starting to adapt to her situation. Not only that, but in the same day, she had unexpectedly learned much about the dangers of the forest and gained knowledge pertaining to them. Her capacity for learning was extremely high, and even Jian Chen couldn't help but admire it. Of course, What was important was looking at her talent for cultivation, since in the Tianyuan continent, one's own strength was what dictated who they were over everything else. Liang Xiaolu was also extraordinarily smart. Although she wasn't very strong, she definitely didn't cause trouble for Tai Ta or Jianshen, nor was she a burden like the two had previously thought she would be. She would stay behind the two, and whenever the two fought against a magical beast, she would stand far away so that she wouldn't get caught up in it. After that day, both Jianshen or Tai Ta had a new levels of respect for Liang Xiaolu, and no longer belittled her in their hearts. Later that night, the three of them sat by the campfire to count the pile of monster cores. Dear seniors, have you two really not condensed your saint weapons and become saints yet? Liang Xiaolu asked as she stared at them with her bright eyes. What a strange question. Her clothes were already filled with holes from the trees and thorns that stabbed and cut into her, and her pretty face resembled a kitty from the whisker-like cuts. Since there were no water sources, she had to rely on drinking the blood of the magical beasts in order to stave off the thirst, and so there was no way she could wash off the filth on her face. If we were saints, why would I be using this axe? Tai Ta looked at his bundled up and heavily nicked battle axe with no small amount of dissatisfaction. After continued usage with Tai Ta's strength, the giant battle axe had finally worn out. The previously sharp edge was now becoming blunt after use. Even the previously sharp point on Jian Chen's corroded iron rod had nearly become flat. Liang Xiaoli's face was full of admiration as she stared at the two. You two are really amazing. You're not even at the saint level yet and you can easily kill class 1 magical beasts. In my opinion, once you reach the saint level, you will be able to kill class 2 magical beasts with ease. Jianshen shook his head. How would it be easy? These are magical beasts that were bred by the academy, so they have weak attack power. When we meet magical beasts with a stronger attack, then we will definitely have a harder time with it. Liang Xiaolu nodded her head and said grimly, that's right. I've heard my dad say before that there are some amazing class 1 magical beasts that can spit out some low-level spells with a high amount of attack power. They're so strong that some normal saints aren't powerful enough to beat them. Jianshen looked at Tai Ta, who was focusing on the campfire. Tai Ta, right now there isn't anything in the second region that could stand a chance against us, so I want to move to the third region. How do you feel about that? Tai Ta gave it some thought before saying, right, the second region is already very easy for us since there isn't a challenge anymore. Okay then, Changyang Xiang Tian, I'll enter the third region with you. It's time to see how strong the class 2 magical beasts really are. Hearing the two talk, Liang Xiaolu, who was sitting nearby, said, it can't be, you two haven't reached the saint level and you still want to enter the third region to fight class 2 magical beasts? Without a saint weapon, there's no guarantee of survival, and the skin of a class 2 magical beast is stronger than that of class 1 magical beasts, so it's even tougher. You two only have a worn battle axe and corroded iron rod, so that'll make killing even harder. Not only that, but the environment in the third region isn't good at all. I've heard that there's even a marsh filled with poisonous vipers inside. There's a high chance you of losing your lives in the dangerous third region. Tai Ta laughed as he looked at my weapon. That's right, Changyang Xiang Tian, over these past 2 days, our weapons have been in constant use, and my battle axe has lost its sharpness. Even your own iron rod is almost flat, so it would be hard to kill class 2 magical beasts. Jianshen laughed. There's no rush, there are still plenty of students in the second region. We still haven't met with other students because we're still far away from them. We should return tomorrow, and exchange monster cores for weapons, since the students would be definitely interested. Yeah, that's a good idea, Tai Ta nodded in agreement. Jianshen continued, Liang Xiaolu, let's split up tomorrow. If you're with other students, then you should be able to safely pass through your last day. After all, anyone who has been able to endure 2 days here must have some real skills. Liang Xiaolu nodded wordlessly. Her expression was a bit disappointed. After all, she also knew of the third region's dangers. She was unsure if Jianshen and Tai Ta would be able to go against those magical beasts. If she continued along with them, even if Jianshen and Tai Ta agreed to let her accompany them, she would only be a baggage that would hold them down. The night passed without incident. Soon, the sky began to brighten. Jian Shen and Tai Ta finished their night of cultivation, and began to prepare breakfast. After the three of them had finished eating, the sun had already gradually began to rise into the sky. They continued on their way, however, this time, they had begun walking back in the direction they had come from. After 2 days of battles, the two boys had already become extremely skilled at sensing and avoiding danger, so it didn't take long for them to arrive at their destination. Under a large tree, 9 students in tattered clothing were tiredly sitting underneath, catching their breaths. They were a group of commoners mixed with some nobles. At the moment, their clothes were ripped all over the place, with some dried-out bloodstains covering them as well. They also sported injuries on their bodies, and not far from them was a carcass of a magical beast lying on the ground. Everyone, hold on for just a bit longer. This is already the last day. After this day ends, we can leave, a commoner student breathlessly said. It's unfortunate that we don't have enough magic stones yet, we still need 5 more. It looks like we still have to slaughter 5 more magical beasts to pass, said a young noble. Originally, the nobles hadn't been willing to stay together with the commoners, but after encountering the savage magical beast, they were immediately scared out of their wits. Faced with life or death, who would care about people's statuses? Protecting oneself was the greater priority. Thus, the few nobles had gradually decided to join the commoner students. After all, everyone knew there was strength in numbers. In addition, perhaps because the commoners had been raised in harsher environments, they did not show any signs of retreating when faced with savage magical beasts. This changed the arrogant nobles' views of the commoners. Eventually, they had all slowly become friends. Moreover, after constantly fighting against magical beasts, the 9 of them had become more comfortable working together. Eventually, they had formed an unexpected bond that held all of them together with close relationships. At that moment, there was a movement in the grass off in the distance. Everyone, be careful. A magical beast is attacking. A student immediately reacted and loudly warned the others. Instantly, the 9 of them stood up and stared with wary expressions towards the direction the sound had come from. The grass swayed vigorously. Eventually, they saw a figure wearing beast leather swinging a large hatchet around, cutting down the weeds in his way. Right after the group noticed him, they saw that there were 2 other figures following behind him as well. Although their clothes were tattered, it was obvious that they were all wearing the Kargath Academy uniforms. Perhaps because they had been traveling through the lush forest for so long, but their faces were dark, and they had random twigs in their hair. Only their general facial structures could be seen, their appearances were already indistinguishable. Realizing that the figures were people and not magical beasts, the 9 students immediately sighed in relief, and smiles slowly spread across their faces. At this point, if they could get those new people to join them, then the overall strength of their group would definitely rise. Hunting magical beasts would be much easier. In addition, all of them were smart enough to realize that these people who had stayed here for 3 days must be quite powerful. Of course, these 3 people were Jian Chen, Tai Ta, and Liang Xiaolu. After backtracking for half a day, they had finally discovered a group of people. Since it was already the last of the 3 days, there weren't many people remaining in the forest. Most of them had already ran away, and so there were very few students that were still here. When Liang Xiaoli's gaze rested on a gorgeous girl standing amongst the group of 9, she showed a pleasantly surprised expression. Ah! Li Sha! Liang Xiaolu shouted out with an extremely excited voice, as she immediately flew towards the gorgeous girl. Hearing a slightly familiar voice, the girl blinked her large, shining eyes, and gazed at Liang Xiaolu, who was running towards her, in slight confusion. Currently, Liang Xiaoli's face was covered with quite a bit of dirt, making her look like a calico cat. Even if this girl called Li Sha did know Liang Xiaolu well, it was difficult for her to recognize Liang Xiaolu with her current appearance. Liang Xiaolu rushed to the girl, and excitedly hugged her tightly. In a tone filled with joy, she said, Li Sha, I hadn't imagined that I would have been able to see you again here. I thought you had already left the forest. Hearing the overly familiar voice, the girl named Li Sha finally recognized who Liang Xiaolu was. Pleasantly surprised, she said, You're Xiao Lu. Chapter 40, Exchanging Weapons/Pia. That's right, Li Sha. I'm Xiao Lu, Liang Xiao Lu spoke, her voice dripping with emotion as she confirmed her friend's words. Xiao Lu, it really is you, that's great. I thought that you had already escaped from this place. I never would have imagined that I would see you here. Li Sha, the girl in front of Liang Xiao Lu, was just as happy, and continued to hug her once thought to be lost friend. The two girls joined in a tight embrace. Li Sha was laughing out loud. Liang Xiao Lu, I didn't think we'd be able to meet again after losing each other in the forest. This really makes me happy. Hello, said a youth wearing clothing as tattered as the other two. I'm so glad to have met the two of you here. How should I put this? I'm not sure if you want, but would you be willing to join our group? If you do, I can certainly guarantee that together our group will be much stronger and consequently will make hunting magical beasts a lot easier. And besides, danger lurks around every corner in these woods. It'd be better if we worked together. His tone was first likable as he walked up to Jian Chen and Tai Ta, but as soon as he saw that Jian Chen's clothes were entirely crimson with fresh blood, he couldn't help but express shock. The youth seriously doubted that the blood was all from Jian Chen, because anyone who lost that much blood would definitely be beyond weak. There was no way such a person could firmly stand there, with such a sharp look. Jian Chen shook his head, politely refusing, I'm sorry, but we were just planning to leave this place, so we cannot join your group. The youth had an expression of regret on his face. However, he still reconciled. My two fellow students, although the magical beasts here are quite formidable, we have strength in numbers. As long as everyone is willing to work together, even if we meet two magical beasts at once, they definitely won't pose any threat. If everyone hands over 2 Class 1 magic stones, I believe that we will soon gather enough. The youth continued to press the issue. His gaze was quite sharp, and it was obvious that he had already realized that Jian Chen's and Tai Ta's strengths were above average. We really do not have any other options. The two of us have already decided to leave here, so we cannot join your group. Please forgive us. In order to reciprocate the formal request, Jian Chen's tone was just as amiable. Hearing that Jian Chen and Tai Ta were set on leaving, the youth could not help but be disappointed. He really could not understand why, although only 1 out of the 3 days was remaining, the two people refused to stay. As long as they paid up 2 Class 1 magic stones, they'd be able to successfully join. Yet, Jian Chen and Tai Ta still chose to leave the area. Could it be that the two of them really wanted to pass up such an opportunity? The youth thought that Jian Chen and Tai Ta had given up and wanted to leave the forest. He couldn't have ever imagined that their leaving actually meant leaving the 2nd region to enter the 3rd region, not actually leaving the forest. At that moment, Tai Ta glanced at the battle axe that one of the students was holding. His eyes lit up in happiness, and he directly walked over to the student with an intrepid air, and asked in a muffled voice, Hey, if I give you 2 Class 1 magic stones, will you trade your battle axe for them? Asking this, Tai Ta pulled out the battle axe on his back with one hand, and used his other hand to retrieve from his space belt 2 Class 1 magic stones that were still covered in fresh blood. It was at that moment that the group of people realized that the large battle axe in Tai Ta's hands was covered in fresh blood. The entire surface had been dyed crimson. The appearance alone was beyond shocking. It looked as if it was a murder weapon that had been constantly doused by blood. What was even more disbelieving was that the battle axe, made of firm metal as hard as steel, had already been completely riddled with cracks. Moreover, some parts of the blade were even bent. Most people would not be able to believe this sight. They had all assumed that when Tai Ta had chosen his weapon, it had been like this from the beginning. There was no way they could have imagined that all of the axe's damages had been caused by Tai Ta himself. The student with the intrepid air looked at the beaten-up axe in front of him, which was so red that it looked like it had been made from blood, and was at a loss for a moment. When the other students heard Tai Ta's request, their eyes immediately lit up, and looked at the intrepid student with looks of envy, as if they were about to offer up their own weapons to trade with Tai Ta. My fellow student, I can exchange this sword of mine with you. A student carrying a giant one-handed sword walked over to Tia Ta and said with a smile. Hearing, Tai Ta looked down at the battle axe that was in his grip, shook his head and spoke, "No need, I still prefer to use the battle axe." Hearing this, the male suddenly had a face full of disappointment. At this moment, getting 2 Class 1 magic stones was more important than anything else. Not to mention him, if the others could, they would also be willing to trade their weapons to Tai Ta for 2 Class 1 magic stones. Even if their weapons were worth more than 2 Class 1 magic stones, they would still not hesitate. The tall and sturdy male was not dumb. After considering it for a bit, he happily handed over his battle axe to fulfill the exchange. Who would be willing to refuse such a profitable exchange? After the exchange was completed, the group of people began to look at Tai Ta with a different light. A few of the smarter students had already connected the battle axe's battered state to the possibility that Tai Ta had caused it. From this point, they could directly confirm Tai Ta's extraordinary strength. Otherwise, why else would he just casually hand over 2 Class 1 magic stones? This place wasn't like outside. Before entering the forest, the school administration had already confiscated any devices the students had. They had even patted the students' bodies down to thoroughly check. There was absolutely no way the magic stone could have been brought in from the outside. The only way that magic stones could be gained inside the forest was to hunt magical beasts. However, there was just one thing the people couldn't understand. If Tai Ta and Jian Shen had the strength to hunt magical beasts, why didn't they want to stay in the forest for all 3 days? After all, the Academy's rules clearly dictated that they could only pass if they stayed for 3 days and paid up 2 Class 1 magic stones. If only one was fulfilled, they wouldn't pass. Could it be that they don't care about the rewards? Or perhaps they had lied about leaving, and actually just didn't want to kill magical beasts together with the few of us? Everyone could not help but think of these possibilities. When considering these thoughts, a few of the people immediately began to gaze at Jian Shen and Tai Ta with expressions of discontent. Jian Shen did not pay any mind to their expressions. He looked at the Liang Xiaolu and the girl she was hugging, and said, "Liang Xiaolu, since you found your friend now, why don't you just stick with this group? They have more people too." Liang Xiaolu slowly separated from the girl, and looked back at Jian Shen and Tai Ta. She nodded. "Then you two have to be careful." Afterwards, Tai Ta and Jian Shen didn't bother wasting any time, and immediately left the area. After the two of them had left, the girl called Li Sha asked in a resentful tone, "Xiaolu, who are they? They're so arrogant that they don't even think they should be with us." "Li Sha, you're mistaken. It's not that they don't want to be together with you guys, they really do want to leave here." Liang Xiaolu explained. "That can't be." Li Sha exclaimed in disbelief. "Li Sha, the fact that they could casually give away a Class 1 magic stone means that the two of them have the strength to kill magical beasts. Plus, when they were trading the 2 magical stones away for the weapon, it was obvious that they were planning on continuing to fight. How could they possibly be leaving this place?" "That's right, Xiaolu, you've been tricked by them." A youth standing on the side added. Liang Xiaolu smiled. "They're definitely leaving this place, but they didn't explain it clearly to you guys. They want to leave the 2nd region, and move on to the 3rd region to hunt the Class 2 magical beasts." "What? Liang Xiaolu, what kind of joke are you trying to pull? It's impossible for the two of them to go to the 3rd region to hunt Class 2 magical beasts. Could it be that their strengths have already reached Saint level? But that can't be right either. If they had reached the Saint level, then there would be no need to change weapons. Those two are really reckless, to want to go to the 3rd region. They're definitely seeking death." Immediately following Liang Xiaoli's words, the group of people immediately broke into chaos as they began to discuss in a frenzy amongst each other. None of them thought that Jian Shen and Tai Ta would be able to survive the 3rd region. Li Sha pulled at Liang Xiaoli's hands, and in a clearly disbelieving tone, she asked, "Xiaolu, they aren't really crazy enough to run over to the 3rd region, right?" Liang Xiaolu nodded. "That's right, they really did go to the 3rd region." "Li Sha, you cannot underestimate the two of them, they're really formidable," Liang Xiaolu said with conviction. Could it be that the two of them really are saints? Li Sha asked in shock. The school administration had clearly declared that all students that were saints had to enter the third region. There was no way they could have appeared in the second region. Liang Shaolu shook her head. No, their powers haven't reached saint level yet, because they still haven't condensed their saint weapons. Hearing this, Li Sha's shock grew even more pronounced. Without reaching saint level, surviving in the second region was already difficult enough, let alone being in the third region. After all, the magical beasts in the third region were Class 2 magical beasts, which weren't any small amount stronger than Class 1 magical beasts. The two classes could not even be compared. Li Sha and Liang Shaolu were close friends. Therefore, Liang Shaolu didn't feel the need to hide anything from Li Sha. In a soft voice, she said, Li Sha, I'll just tell you this. Yesterday, I personally witnessed the two of them kill 70+ magical beasts by themselves. Li Sha was beyond shocked by this, as she exclaimed, What? Shaolu, are you joking? The two of them killed 70+ magical beasts by themselves in one day? Li Sha was so astonished that she couldn't contain her voice. She had gradually become louder and louder, until the other 8 people were able to hear her quite clearly. In that instant, all of their expressions changed at the thought of Jian Chen and Tai Ta achieving what Liang Shaolu had said, and their expressions were beyond disbelief. Li Sha, what did you say? Which 2 people were able to kill 70+ Class 1 magical beasts in a day? A youth asked. He could not accept the possibility that the 2 people were actually Jian Chen and Tai Ta, whom they had just met. Li Sha tried to calm her breathing, and grasped at her chest before pointing to Liang Shaolu. In a trembling voice, she said, Shaolu said that she personally witnessed the 2 people just now kill 70+ magical beasts in one day. Li Sha's tone reflected the fact that she thought such a possibility was inconceivable. Chapter 41, Flaming Cloud Beast/Pete, It can't be, Liang Shaolu, what you're saying is ridiculous. Those 2 aren't even saints yet, to think they could kill over 70 magical beasts in a day? That's impossible. A youth with a pike said incredulously. That's right, it's too ridiculous. Even a saint wouldn't cut it. I think even a great saint wouldn't be able to kill that many Class 1 magical beasts in a single day, let alone half. I doubt their saint force is that unlimited. A bow-wielding girl said with doubt. At that moment, the youth that had invited Jian Chen and Tai Ta into the group said, Liang Shaolu, do you know who they are? When did our Kargath Academy have such amazing people in it? They aren't saints, but to easily defeat Class 1 magical beasts? Just who are they? Saying this, he seemed to have immediately realized something, as his face rapidly changed colors. Liang Shaoli's face looked proud as if she had done something honorable. With a laid-back tone, she said, I can tell you this, the one that just traded you a monster core for your battle axe was the one that set the academy abuzz, Tai Ta, the headmaster's apprentice. The other person is the freshman ruler of the annual freshman competition, Changyang Xiang Tian. Everyone cried out in alarm before talking amongst themselves in excitement. So it was those 2 abnormal people, no wonder their strength was that strong. It can't be, it said that Tai Ta fought Lord Sheng to a standstill at the library, that Changyang Xiang Tian was the one who beat the Saint Ka Di Yun in an intense duel. I was there watching the fight, Changyang Xiang Tian's strength was really amazing. I heard that outside the library, the middle-ranked Saint Luo Jian wasn't able to deal with Changyang Xiang Tian, and was even forced to use his saint weapon in the end. Without the burden of having Liang Shaolu anymore, Tai Ta and Jian Chen's speed had risen exponentially, and so the 2 soon reached the third region. When they first entered the third region, they initially saw no difference in the 2 regions. But the further they advanced, the more hellish it became. Compared to the third region, the second region could be called a paradise. There were all sorts of magical beasts in the forest, and the land was full of swamps, so if one wasn't careful, they would find themselves stuck deep inside the waters. However, most of the swamps were man-made, so they weren't too deep. Otherwise, if no one came to rescue them, they wouldn't be able to escape with their lives. Perhaps it was because of the ground, but there wasn't much grass in the third region, so line of sight was much better than the second region. Jian Shen and Tai Ta cautiously trekked through the swamplands with a small amount of powder on them. This type of powder was a type of repellent that would prevent insects from biting them. Changyang Xiang Tian, it seems like you're familiar with the forest. Could it be you've been here before? How could you be this amazing? Tai Ta said, while looking at the layer of green dust on his body. Jian Shen chuckled and said, I read up a lot of books in the library about various places, so my understanding of the forests is relatively high. Ah, no wonder. Tai Ta realized. Right after Tai Ta spoke, Jian Shen's face stilled before becoming serious. At the same time, the ground began to shake, as if an earthquake was occurring. But before Jian Shen could say anything, Tai Ta had already sprung into action, his new battle-axe coming to rest in both his hands. Jian Shen glanced towards his left and spoke cautiously, Tai Ta, be careful. This time it looks like we've come across a large magical beast. Yeah. Tai Ta nodded his head as the expression on his face grew solemn. Because they were in the third region, this wasn't a Class 1 magical beast, but a Class 2 magical beast that was stronger than a Class 1 magical beast by many times over. It could fight against a great saint on even footing. Although its attack power wasn't all that strong yet, its strength still couldn't be underestimated. As the two of them nervously looked around, the magical beast finally came into view. Its entire body had red fur, and it spanned 3 meters tall and 5 meters wide. Protruding from its mouth, it had 2 long tusks that looked as if they could penetrate through muscle with ease. If it weren't for the fact that the magical beast had a short nose, then Jian Shen would have thought that this was an animal that he had met in his previous world, the elephant. But this magical beast was a lot bigger than the elephant. Tai Ta, be careful, this is the Class 2 magical beast, the flaming cloud beast. It can spit out fire from its mouth and is quite hard to deal with. Jian Shen uttered the magical beast's name. Because he had read so many books in the library, he could recognize most magical beasts, and even knew of some of their special abilities. Tai Ta only nodded, as he wordlessly focused all of his attention on the flaming cloud beast, ready to strike at any moment. Ho! The gigantic flaming cloud beast roared as it started to move each of its 4 hooves towards Jian Shen and Tai Ta. With each stamp on the ground, the earth would to shake. Jian Shen's eyes flashed in concentration. I'll attack it from the front. Tai Ta, you go around and attack it from behind. Charging forward, he jumped into the air straight towards the flaming cloud beast's head. The moment Jian Shen had moved, Tai Ta started to move as well, and circled around the beast to come towards its behind. Standing on top of its head, Jian Shen let out a yell as his saint force gathered within his iron rod, before fiercely stabbing it into the head of the beast. Ding! As if made of steel, the head of the flaming cloud beast deflected Jian Shen's iron rod. It had only left a shallow line on its head, unable to penetrate through its defense. Jian Shen's face changed into a grimace. Although he knew the flaming cloud beast had a strong defense, he hadn't thought that it would be so strong that his iron rod could do no damage to it. He had used all of his strength in that attack, and it had unexpectedly done virtually nothing. Ah hey! With a roar, Tai Ta jumped forward and used his enormous strength to slash at the butt of the flaming cloud beast with his battle-axe. However, he didn't do any better than Jian Shen. Although his battle-axe had cut through the skin of the magical beast, it had done no damage at all. Their attacks had evidently angered the flaming cloud beast, because it roared in response. Whipping its head back and forth, it threw off Jian Shen, who had been standing on its head. As Jian Shen flew through the air, he quickly readjusted himself. Using both of his feet to jump off a tree trunk, he flipped himself upright onto a nearby tree branch. After throwing off Jian Shen, the flaming cloud beast turned around and tried to bite into Tai Ta. Tai Ta immediately leapt aside to avoid its mouth, and simultaneously swung his battle-axe into one of the giant tusks. Ding! The battle-axe smashed against the tusk, breaking it off near the root. However, after the tusk was broken off, Tai Ta's battle-axe chipped off in several places as well. Ho! The flaming cloud beast roared in anger as it stampeded towards Tai Ta once more. Tai Ta's eyes flashed dangerously as it watched the flaming cloud beast charge towards him. Without bothering to dodge, Tai Ta dropped his battle axe onto the ground and used both of his hands to grab onto the remaining tusk and the root of the broken one, before pushing back at the monster, resulting in a deadlock. At that moment, it was as if Tai Ta had turned into a fierce beast. Grunting out loud, his hands pushed against the flaming cloud beast's tusks, as if trying to compare his strength to it. Despite Tai Ta's heavenly strength, he was still a delicate tiny figure compared to the heavy and gigantic flaming cloud beast. So even though his own strength wasn't lacking, he found himself being pushed backwards a large distance, his feet leaving behind 2 deep marks in the ground. Ah! Tai Ta's eyes revealed a crazy look within them as he roared. The veins within his arms bulged as both of his arms swelled up in an instant, as he began to exert more force. Pa! Another crisp sound was heard as the remaining tusk was snapped off by Tai Ta, causing the flaming cloud beast to release a blood-curdling roar of pain. Despite having used a good amount of his strength, Tai Ta was not yet satisfied, as he grabbed onto the freshly broken-off tusk and used it to pierce it into the head of the flaming cloud beast. The tooth of the flaming cloud beast was extraordinarily sharp, and was far stronger than Jian Chen's weapon. But despite its sharpness, it had only penetrated into the head by a tiny amount, causing a small amount of blood to spurt outwards. Seeing Tai Ta use its own tusk to stab it, the flaming cloud beast's eyes grew extremely red as it opened its mouth wide. With a loud roar, it unleashed a trail of fire that moved around, almost like a serpent emerging from its gaping jaws, with the intention of roasting Tai Ta alive. Instantly, the surrounding temperature had started to increase exponentially. Sensing the astonishing heat radiate from the stream of fire, Tai Ta's expression immediately changed, as he desperately threw himself away from the attack. But despite his efforts, he had not been able to dodge the attack of the fire serpent, and so his entire body caught on fire. Seeing Tai Ta's body catch on fire, Jian Chen turned pale with fright. Immediately snapping off a thick tree branch, he jumped off against a tree trunk and sped towards the Tai Ta like a speeding bullet. Ho! The flaming cloud beast roared once more as it stamped towards the still burning Tai Ta. Opening its jaws wide, it tried to swallow him, not caring if he was on fire or not. Just as the flaming cloud beast was about to consume Tai Ta, Jian Chen had finally reached Tai Ta. Using both of his arms, Jian Chen waved the tree branch in his hand to drag Tai Ta a good 10 meters away from the jaws of the magical beast. Jian Chen quickly dislodged Tai Ta from the branch, and without caring for the fire's heat, he quickly extended his arms and tore away at the wolf leather Tai Ta was wearing. Because the fire had caught onto the fur of the wolf leather, the moment it was removed from him, Tai Ta was no longer on fire. Tai Ta's tattered academy uniform was exposed underneath. Tai Ta didn't bother to get up from the floor, but instead started to roll on the ground while complaining, "Hot, hot. I'm dying from the heat, it burns." Seeing him complain like that, Jian Chen deduced that Tai Ta had not suffered any major harm. However, all of his hair had been burnt off, leaving him bald. Not a single hair remained, even his eyebrows and eyelashes had been burnt away. Chapter 42, Roadside Robbery / P. Tai Ta, are you alright? Jian Chen asked in concern. Tai Ta shook his head. He let out a long breath, and spoke in a muffled voice, "I'm fine, but the heat really got me, it was difficult to endure." "As long as you're fine." Jian Chen sighed in relief. When he saw that Tai Ta was engulfed in flames, Jian Chen had honestly felt quite concerned for Tai Ta's well-being. Suddenly, Jian Chen's eyes hardened as he turned back to look at the lush tree. His eyes gleamed as his mouth also rose up to show a hint of a smile. Hong! 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 The ground began to shake again as the flaming cloud beast stamped towards Jian Chen. With each step it took, the earth trembled. The flaming cloud beast kept breathing fire out of its mouth, almost as if it was excited. Tai Ta's face hardened as he stared at the approaching flaming cloud beast. "Changyang Xiang Tian, this guy's skin is fairly tough. How do we go about killing him?" Jian Chen also looked at the beast with a grave face, the flaming cloud beast's body is entirely covered by a strong layer of skin. Unless we reach the level of saints, our weapons will barely be able to slice apart its pelt. At the moment, our only chance is to attack through the flaming cloud beast's eyes to stab its brain. As Jianshan trailed off, the flaming cloud beast roared, and opened up its jaws to release another serpent fire. Jianshan and Tai Ta both dove towards the side to dodge it. Jianshan tightly clenched the iron rod, as he cried out, "Tai Ta, distract it for me. Don't worry, leave it to me." Tai Ta picked up a nearby rock and threw it at the flaming cloud beast, and ran towards the opposite direction. The rock twirled in midair before hitting the flaming cloud beast precisely on the spot where Tai Ta had broke off the tusk. Since the spot was still tender for the flaming cloud beast, its eyes turned red with bloodlust as it began to breath fire at Tai Ta once more. Jianshan watched as Tai Ta distracted the flaming cloud beast. He gripped the iron rod so hard that it had began to deform. Quickly running forward, he dashed towards the head of the flaming cloud beast. Jianshan's speed was fairly fast. As he dashed across the ground, the grass around him swayed from the rapid air currents, which made him seem like he was flying. In a short moment, Jianshan had reached the head of the flaming cloud beast. Not even caring for the intense heat from the streams of fire the beast was spitting out, he jumped into the air once more to land on the head of the beast. With the iron rod in his right hand, he quickly stabbed it into the eyes of the flaming cloud beast. Although Jianshan had moved quickly, the flaming cloud beast wasn't slow to react either. Before the iron rod could pierce the eye, the beast suddenly shut its eyes. Jianshan's eyes flashed for just a brief second as he saw the flaming cloud beast close its eyes. Focusing, Jianshan condensed his soul and willed it to enter his iron rod. As it covered the sharp point of the iron rod, he tried to ram it into the eyelid of the flaming cloud beast. The iron rod then pierced through the eyelid with no difficulty or resistance. Immediately, blood came pouring out of the eye of the flaming cloud beast. Ho! The flaming cloud beast suddenly let loose a desolate cry that shook the heavens themselves, as it whirled and struck out randomly in all directions. Jianshan exerted more pressure on his right arm, pushing the iron rod in even deeper in an attempt to strike at the brain from the eyes. The flaming cloud beast's screams became more desolate as it started to sway back and forth. It attempted to remove the iron rod from its eye, but the rod had already sunk in far too deep, making it difficult to remove. As it shook its head to remove Jianshan, the pain grew more intense. After 2 attempts at shaking its head, the pain was so fierce for the flaming cloud beast that it didn't dare to move at all anymore. Endlessly wailing in pain, the flaming cloud beast dropped to the ground, where it began its final struggle to fight. Although the wound wasn't fatal, the damage done to its cranial nerves was excruciatingly hard to bear. Seeing the flaming cloud beast fall to the ground, Jianshan flashed in glee as he yelled, "Tai Ta, quickly drive the iron rod deeper in." Given Tai Ta's heavenly strength, this task couldn't be more appropriate for anyone else. "All right, I'm on my way." Tai Ta cried out happily as he ran over, having now realized that victory was on hand. Tai Ta approached the flaming cloud beast quickly and grabbed the iron rod before pushing it 1 meter deeper into the eye of the flaming cloud beast with his right hand. Only a small portion of the rod was left sticking out. Ho! The loudest cry yet came out of the beast, causing Tai Ta and Jianshan's ears to momentarily go deaf. With that, the flaming cloud beast expended the last of its energy and slumped onto the ground. It stopped twitching, and its other eye gradually closed. Seeing that the beast had finally died, Jianshan and Tai Ta could not help but exhale in relief. The Class 2 magical beast flaming cloud beast wasn't that amazing, but its defenses were extraordinarily high. Thus, killing it was an extremely difficult task. It finally died. This magical beast was too troublesome. It even breathed out fire and burnt away all my hair. Tai Ta touched his bald head with a depressed expression. Jianshan could only laugh as he watched Tai Ta gloom over his hair and clothes. "You should at the very least put something on," he said as he took out another wolf pelt from his space belt. The wolf pelts were something he and Tai Ta had prepared, there were many sets stored within their belts just in case they needed a new change of clothes. Because they were in a forest where battle was a common occurrence, a change of clothes could not be in high enough demand. Tai Ta took it without another word, and in a flash, he had transformed the pelt into wearable clothing. Afterwards, Jian Shen and Tai Ta extracted the monster core and continued on their way. After Jian Shen and Tai Ta disappeared from view, a red-clad figure dropped down from the trees. The figure was a tall woman, around 30 years old, clad in fiery red clothing. Her appearance was not extremely beautiful, yet she gave off a gentle, calm air. The woman stared at the carcass of the flaming cloud beast with astonishment written clearly on her face. Letting out a deep breath, the woman muttered to herself, Tai Ta and Changyang Xiang Tian, you two truly have well-deserved reputations. To think your strengths are this amazing, you two aren't even saints yet and you managed to use regular iron weapons to kill a Class 2 magical beast known for its defenses. I am truly awestruck, I must report this to the headmaster. After saying that, the woman immediately vanished into thin air. As soon as the woman disappeared, another 5 youths came into the clearing. Each of the 5's faces were covered by darkness, so their appearances couldn't be easily seen. However, their shabby academy uniforms could be seen as they held their weapons up. 2 held greatswords while another held up a large axe. The last youth with a tall and sturdy body held his sledgehammer up as he followed the group. Judging from the sound, the cry came from this area. One of the greatsword-wielding youths said to the rest. The axe-carrying student nodded his head, not bad, if the magical beast didn't run too far away, then it should still be in the vicinity. He trailed off as his eyes widened at the sight in front of him. You guys, look. What is that? He pointed. Hearing their friend, everyone's eyes drifted forward as they saw a mountain-like fiery red body lying on the ground that seemed to resemble a magical beast. Let's go look. In a flash, all 5 of them approached the body of the magical beast. However, after they recognized the magical beast, their faces all grew serious. The most experienced one amongst them got close to the body and touched the bloody fur with one hand before saying, "This is a flaming cloud beast. Its defenses are very high, but its attacks aren't all that strong. The blood hasn't dried yet and is still warm, so it must have just died. It would appear that the howl we heard earlier was from this." The sword youth looked around himself before looking at the direction of Jian Chen's footprints. Come, let's go follow those footsteps and see who exactly killed this flaming cloud beast. If their strength is good enough, we can add them to our group so we can easily hunt more beasts. But if they're weaker than us, a small smile started to creep up on his face. Hearing this, the other 4 youths all thought of the same thing, their faces revealing evil smiles. Soon after, the 5 of them immediately chased after Tai Ta and Jian Shen. At the moment, Jian Shen and Tai Ta were cautiously walking within the forest. In order to protect themselves from magical beasts as well as a few of the swamps on the ground, the 2 of them were not advancing very quickly. At that moment, Jian Shen's ears detected something. Holding his hand up to stop Tai Ta, he said, "Be careful, there's some people coming from behind us." Tai Ta immediately stopped moving and turned around in curiosity. In the blink of an eye, the people who had been following Jian Shen came into view. There was a total of 5 people, but Jian Shen couldn't see their faces since it was covered by the shade, but he could tell that they were strong from the amount of saint force they were emitting from their weapons. When the 5 saw Jian Shen and Tai Ta, they let loose happy smiles to each other, as if they had mutually agreed on something. Increasing their speeds, the 5 of them quickly reached and surrounded Jian Shen and Tai Ta. Seeing this development, both Tai Ta and Jian Shen felt a bad premonition within themselves. "Dear students, might I ask what you're doing?" Jian Shen asked. One of the youths brandished his sword with an evil smile. "You're asking us what we are doing? Hand over your space belts obediently. We definitely don't want to embarrass you, but if you don't comply, ha ha ha," the sledgehammer-wielding student sneered at them. Tai Ta's face grew angry as he heard the demand. "You want us to hand over the space belts? Humph, don't even think about it." Tai Ta understood what was going on now. This was a roadside robbery. Jianshan patted the space belt on him gently with a smile. The space belts with all our monster cores are inside. If you have the skill, come and get it then. Although they knew that all 5 of them were saints, neither Jianshan nor Tai Ta felt a hint of fear. Since it came down to this, then don't blame us for this. Everyone, attack together. Immediately the 5 of them rushed forward to attack the 2, but their attacks were not aimed at fatal areas. The 5 clearly understood that they were still all students. Stealing was one thing, and so was fighting, but they were not allowed to fatally threaten the opposing party's lives. Chapter 43, Counter Steal. Jianshan and Tai Ta immediately dove to the side. After 2 days of relentlessly fighting magical beasts, even the thick-skulled Tai Ta had started to pick up battle experience. This paid off. As Tai Ta dodged the incoming attack, he instinctively swung his battle axe at the leg of the assailant in a swift counterattack. However, the group in front of them was proving hard to deal with. Just as the battle axe was about to hit one of them in the thigh, a sword flew out and hit the battle axe with a colliding sound. Dang! Metal met metal, as Tai Ta's battle axe was obstructed. Due to Tai Ta's terrifying strength, the battle axe continued to slide down the blade of the sword before stopping at the hilt. Immediately, the youth holding the sword suddenly felt his entire arm go numb, as the battle axe smashed itself against his arm, causing his whole hand to shake. The youth was astonished and cried out to his friends, "Everyone be careful, this guy's strength is abnormally strong. It's best if you don't get into arm's reach of him." Hearing the warning, the other 2 students fighting Tai Ta immediately became more cautious, and tried to avoid his giant battle axe. On the side, Jianshan was fighting intensely with the other youth holding a sword. Although Jianshan's weapon was only a corroded iron rod, his fighting capabilities weren't any lower than Tai Ta's. He wasn't any weaker either, since he could easily use his agility to move around his opponent's moves. Seeing an opening, Jianshan quickly stabbed his iron rod into the opponent's thigh with a lightning-fast speed. Since this was another student at the academy, he didn't dare to aim to kill, but instead aimed to injure. Jianshan's speed was so fast that the student didn't have time to react, and could only watch in shock as the iron rod stabbed into his thigh. Ah! The youth cried out in pain as his face drained of color, and sweat dripped down his forehead. Hearing his companion cry out, the other sword wielder's face changed. Unable to fight Jianshan personally, he cried out to his friend, "Harry, are you okay?" Although that youth wasn't attacking Jianshan anymore, Jianshan wasn't going to let him off that easily. As Jianshan moved towards him, the Saint force condensed into Jianshan's fist as he suddenly punched the youth in the chest. Still moving at fast speeds, he refused to listen to the youth's complaints, or even wait for the youth to react. Jianshan's palm struck out silently like a viper, and hit the other squarely on the chest. Pung! The youth was sent flying through the air from Jianshan's fist, as blood came spurting out of his mouth. After dispatching the 2, he immediately went to go assist Tai Ta. At the moment, Tai Ta was embroiled in a tough battle, and had already taken damage from the 3 people. The wolf pelt he was wearing had already been slashed apart and ruined by the blood that was leaking from his wounds. If it weren't for his extremely durable body and godly strength, the others would not have been afraid to fight against him and knock him to the ground. With the appearance of Jianshan, Tai Ta's pressure was alleviated by quite a bit. Jianshan's strength in battle was extremely strong, and even normal saints wouldn't be able to fight him on equal footing. After a few seconds of close combat fighting against Jianshan, the 3 that had surrounded Tai Ta had already started to lose. Each of them were sporting new injuries, and soon after, all 5 of them were writhing on the floor in pain, no longer having the energy to move. Jianshan looked at the many wounds on Tai Ta, and asked with some concern, "Tai Ta, are you okay?" Tai Ta nodded his head and said, "I'm fine, my body's pretty tough." He pointed to the group of 5 people writhing on the ground. "What should we do with them?" Thinking about it, Jianshan suddenly grew a strange smile on his face. "Tai Ta, go gather their space belts and take all of their monster cores before giving the belts back." Hearing Jianshan, the 5 people on the ground went rigid as their faces paled. A few of them were growing red with indignation. The cores in their space belts were earned over the span of 2 days of constant struggles for their lives. Right now there was only half a day left until the third day passed. If they were to lose all of their monster cores now, then they would definitely fail the mission. Tai Ta laughed. Without hesitation, he immediately followed Jian Chen's orders, and grabbed all 5 of the space belts from them. Jian Chen stared them down with the bloody iron rod in his hand, like a tiger watching his prey to prevent them from making any sudden movements. The 5 students originally had planned to fight back, but when they saw Jian Chen grip the bloody iron rod, they immediately gave up all thoughts about resisting, and obediently let Tai Ta take their space belts. After gathering all of the space belts, Tai Ta brought them back to Jian Chen and began to count the monster cores one by one. In total, they had only 12 monster cores, all of which were Class 2 monster cores. Jian Chen laughed as he grabbed 6 of the monster cores and put them in their own space belts before saying, Tai Ta, let's split these in half, you get 6, I get 6. All right. Tai Ta said as he placed his share into his own space belt. But when the 5 heard Tai Ta's name, all 5 of them went still, as their faces became unsightly to look at. When it came to his name, everyone in Kargath Academy had heard of him since he was the headmaster's apprentice. Although he wasn't a saint, when it came to the entire school, no one dared to mess with him. By this point, the 5 students started to regret their actions so much that their intestines became green. If they had known earlier that one of them was Tai Ta, then they wouldn't have tried to steal from the headmaster's apprentice no matter what. But now, not only were they robbed of what they were trying to steal, but they couldn't even get revenge now that they knew who he was. Their sufferings couldn't be summed up in words. Basically, they regret their actions so much they want to die. After storing all of the Class 2 monster cores, Tai Ta was smiling even brighter. Changyang Xiang Tian, it's because you're so amazing and beat all 5 of them so quickly. I, Tai Ta, just can't compare to you at all. Jian Chen laughed and said, alright, let's get back on the road now and hope we can kill a few more magical beasts for the sake of our cultivation. Soon after, Jian Chen and Tai Ta didn't see the paralyzed looks of the 5 students on the floor as they walked away. When the 2 disappeared into the forest, one of the youths started to curse out loud, fucking hell, what bad luck we have. To think we came across the apprentice of the headmaster and then failed the assignment. Not only that, but we had our monster cores stolen away from us without us being able to get revenge. Such wretched luck. The youth who had carried the sledgehammer earlier said in a hoarse voice, that's not all of it, don't forget that it wasn't just Tai Ta who attacked us, there was another. Everyone's eyes lit up, you're talking about Changyang Xiang Tian. The sledgehammer student nodded his head, that's right, Tai Ta has the support of the headmaster, so we can't get revenge on him. But Changyang Xiang Tian doesn't have that same support. But Changyang Xiang Tian's strength is so strong though. The 5 of us couldn't beat him while he was alone, how would we ever beat him? Another person asked. That's right, and the most important fact was that Changyang Xiang Tian was far too fast, we couldn't even dodge any of his attacks. One of the sword wielders said, it was the very same person who had his thigh pierced by Jian Chen. Then, the person with the axe opened his mouth suddenly, you guys forget that Changyang Xiang Tian already offended a lot of people at the academy like Lord Cheng and Master Luo, whose strength is higher than ours. If we can find an opportunity to join them, sooner or later we'll find a chance to strike at him. In the blink of an eye, the colors of the sky began to dim. The magical beasts in the 3rd region were far less abundant than the ones in the 2nd region. Half a day had passed, but Jian Chen and Tai Ta had only found a few magical beasts. Every time they encountered one, they experienced an arduous battle to kill it. Within that afternoon, the 2 of them had only gained another 7 Class 2 monster cores. Compared to their bounty in the 2nd region, this number was clearly insignificant. But when they thought about how the 5 students who attacked them earlier had only gained 12 Class 2 monster cores in 2 days despite being saints, their hearts felt a bit more relieved. It was a lot more restless in the 3rd region than the 2nd, since the monsters were a lot harder to kill. Also, since the number of monsters were less, more people were willing to rob others for their cores. After Jian Chen and Tai Ta had fought against the 5 students from before, they had another 3 encounters with robbers. At the very least each group had 4 people in it, and at the most a group had 7 of them. But in the end, they had overcome each challenge victorious, and took all of the monster cores from the other groups. But what had made Jianghu depressed was that the group of 4 that attacked them earlier didn't have a single monster core, but the other 2 groups had a total of 33 Class 2 monster cores in the end. When night came, Jianghu and Tai Ta sat down next to the fire as they roasted the meat of a magical beast. The 2 looked exhausted. Compared to the second region, the third region was far more tiring. At this point, Tai Ta's academy uniform was essentially gone. On his chest, his gains were showing. Only the most important part of his body was covered up by one of the extra wolf pelts, making him look like a savage. He was already covered with scars all over, and although they looked painful, they were only superficial wounds that didn't affect Tai Ta at all. This was a strong body that even Jianghu looked at with jealousy. Jianghu, on the other hand, was not faring much better. Although he still stuck with wearing his academy uniform, it had already been dyed red from blood, staining the clothes black after oxidizing. Suddenly, Jianghu could hear the sounds of a distant battle. With his acute ears, he could hear the faintest of sounds. Jianghu stood up from where he was sitting, and looked off to where he heard the sounds. Tai Ta, there's a fight going on over there. Chapter 44. Coincidental meeting with Big Brother. Tai Ta didn't seem to care at all. I bet it's someone fighting against another magical beast. At first, Jianghu thought so too, but the knowledge from his previous life had told him that these were the sounds of battle between people. In this environment, no matter what sound it was, Jianghu was always on alert, especially since he had already been attacked by his fellow students multiple times earlier that day. Jianghu had seen those older and more experienced students fall due to not always being on guard. Jianghu didn't plan to end up like them. Straining his ears to hear the most minute of sounds, Jianghu tried to catch the sounds he heard earlier. But as soon as he furrowed his eyebrows in thought, he heard the sound again. It wasn't the sound of a person fighting a magical beast, but of 2 people fighting each other. In addition, the sounds were getting closer. Jianghu looked at Tai Ta and said, Tai Ta, that's not the sound of a person fighting against a magical beast, but of 2 people fighting each other. The sounds are getting louder and louder, so you should prepare yourself. We might end up fighting. Jianghu didn't choose to change locations. With their current strength, they could easily protect themselves. In addition, he wasn't afraid of anything. Tai Ta immediately became interested as he grabbed his battle axe and asked, how many people do you think are fighting? Changyang Xiang Tian, do you think we should take a look? Jianghu held the iron rod over the fire. No need, even without our interference, they'll be approaching us soon enough. Ah. Tai Ta sat back down after that with a look of serenity. Soon enough, the sounds of battle became louder and louder, to the point where even Tai Ta could hear it. A group of figures quickly came scurrying out from the bushes, and ran to where the bonfire was. Right behind them, a person wearing black flashed in, clearly chasing the other group. My 2 friends, the group behind wants to steal our monster core. Not only are they strong, but their numbers are greater than ours. I hope that we can combine forces and fight them off, otherwise, the hard work we had painstakingly earned over the last 2 days will be taken by them. One person shouted from a distance. Although Jianghu and Tai Ta were only 2 people, if they joined them then they would be able to fairly go against the opposite party. Hearing that voice, Jianghu's eyebrows knitted together. He felt that this voice was very familiar to him, as if he had heard it before. However, he couldn't place a name on the voice. Clearly it hadn't left much of an impression. The 4 people that were running away were getting closer and closer to Jianghu now. The person chasing them from behind suddenly sped forward and blocked off the 4 from moving forward anymore. Holding his giant sword up, he swung his sword at the ones who were still running. The one leading the team fought back with his own saint weapon to block against the sword. Dang! The 2 people had a huge difference in strength that could easily be seen, as the one who had blocked the attack was thrown backwards violently. With this distraction, the people chasing from behind had finally caught up and once more started to attack those who were trying to run away. There were 8 people that had come in pursuit, and all of them quite strong. The difference between their numbers only added to the pressure. Without reinforcements, the ones who were trying to run away would ultimately lose. Luo Jian, just wait there, I won't let you get away. One of the ones who were running away snarled. Hearing this, Jian Shen, who was standing not too far away, went rigid. The voice who spoke out was one he was familiar with. It was his older brother Jianghu. Big brother. Jian Shen cried out in astonishment. Immediately his face became one of shock, and without hesitation, he rushed on over with his iron rod in hand. Seeing Jian Shen move, Tai Ta began follow Jian Shen with his battle axe in hand. For the past 3 days, Tai Ta had started to follow all of Jian Shen's commands without even realizing it. Over the course of the 3 days, Jian Shen's strength had been fully revealed. With his experience of surviving in the forest and his strategy, Tai Ta had been humbled by Jian Shen's talents. Flying across the ground, Jian Shen ran across the grass towards where the fight was taking place. His hands blurred as the iron rod flew through the air and pierced into one of the people his brother was fighting. He was relieved to hear that one of the people coming towards him was his older brother, Jianghu. Although everyone had noticed Jian Shen and Tai Ta, and were all cautiously guarded against the two, Jian Shen had moved far too fast and without warning. In their limited lines of sight due to the darkness, no one had noticed to the iron rod in Jian Shen's hand. The pointed end of the iron rod stabbed into the Jianghu's attacker, causing him to scream out in pain into the night sky as he whirled around. Without waiting for the guy to react further, Jian Shen immediately brought his leg to his chest and kicked him away into the air. Ack! At this moment, Tai Ta also charged over. He swung his axe around, hacking away at the enemies, causing them to be batted away. But the person Tai Ta was swinging at wasn't slow to react either. Watching the axe come down on them, his face didn't reveal the smallest amount of fear, and instead, he brought his sword up to block the axe. Dang! Once the sword met the battle axe, Tai Ta and the other were brought to a deadlock with a loud clang. Their weapons shook. Tai Ta remained where he stood, while the other person was forcibly sent flying backwards. With Tai Ta's godly strength, unless one was a giant, then she would stand no chance against Tai Ta. But the person who was fighting against him was no giant, and so he had taken a huge loss. However, even with that development, Tai Ta's battle axe chipped once more. Although the difference in strength was huge, if Tai Ta had not enveloped his battle axe with his own saint force, then the battle axe would have long since been destroyed. Ah! Tai Ta let loose a snarl as he brandished his battle axe. The group of robbers then dispatched another 2 people to face off against Tai Ta. Dang! After his clear clang, another person who didn't understand how strong Tai Ta was collided against him one more time. Immediately, he was launched into the air by Tai Ta's battle axe, which caused his battle axe to chip even more. Although Tai Ta's battle axe was strong, it was far from being on the same level as a saint weapon, because every saint weapon had a great amount of energy within it. With a saint weapon, one could release an attack far stronger than normal blows. However, these people Jian Shen were fighting against were far too weak, and some of them were still at the primary levels of a saint. While Tai Ta could go toe-to-toe with those primary-leveled saints, his battle axe had been through far too many collisions. Be careful, his strength is extraordinarily high, and watch out for his battle axe. The one who was blown away from him yelled as a warning. Hearing his companion's warning, the remaining youth became extremely cautious. He dodged the battle axe, and grabbed onto Tai Ta's space belt. Jian Shen was moving around with the speed of lightning. As his iron rod flashed this way and that. With his body moving like a spirit's, he fought alongside with Jianghu. Already dyed red with blood, the iron rod was concealed under the shade of the night, as if it was a viper. As he wandered about the area in the darkness, his iron rod shot out silently, in a silent manner that was difficult for his enemies to detect. Jian Shen was striking out with his iron rod so fast that even the person fighting Jianghu were not able to react in time, as his thighs were speared through with the iron rod. The person's face grimaced in pain as he let out a painful scream, and clenched his hands in reflex. Changyang, who was not courteous enough to wait for him to simmer down, and immediately sliced at his opponent's left shoulder. Immediately, he cried out in pain again as his left arm was cut, the sword cutting the bone clean off, leaving his arm to be connected to his arm by a small amount of flesh. A torrent of blood came spurting out as he grabbed at it. A cyan-colored light illuminated the night as they all saw a giant sword appear and slash down towards Jian Chen. Wind attributed Saint Force. Seeing the cyan light envelop the sword, Jian Chen's own face hardened. He immediately used the profound steps and melted away into the air like a mirage. As soon as he had faded away, the cyan sword immediately slashed through at the spot where Jian Chen had just been standing. Jian Chen reappeared 3 meters away, not too far away. The person who had slashed at him stood arrogantly at the spot, wearing a Raggedy Academy uniform dyed red with blood. His face was covered by the night, so Jian Chen couldn't recognize him. Jian Chen's eyes focused on the group. He snorted and said in a low voice, "Luo Jian, I didn't think I would meet you here." The youth Jian Chen addressed was startled. He thought the voice was far too familiar, so he carefully stared at Jian Chen. Although it was nighttime, there was still a gleaming light in the sky that allowed him to see Jian Chen's face clearly. However, after 3 days of constant fighting in the forest, without any clear water, everyone's faces was jet black. It was impossible for people to see each other's appearances with ease. However, the nearby Changyang, who heard the voice of Jian Chen, and his face became one of shock. He couldn't believe his eyes or ears. Your fourth brother." Changyang, who was astonished, when it came to Jian Chen's voice, he was all too familiar with it. Luo Jian suddenly came to a realization as he laughed, "No wonder I thought your voice was familiar. So it was Changyang Xiang Tian after all. I didn't think you would break through to becoming a saint. I really am amazed at that." After saying that, his eyes flashed dangerously. Jian Chen turned around and faced Changyang, who, "Big brother, we'll talk later. Right now, I'll remove the crisis in front of us. You go help the others, and leave Luo Jian to me." Chapter 45, Luo Jian's defeat. "All right then, you take care of yourself, fourth brother." Luo Jian's strength has already reached the middle-ranked saint level. Changyang, who immediately went off to help his friends. Although seeing Jian Chen in the third region was unexpected, he knew that now wasn't the time to try to figure out how or why. Because Jian Chen and Tai Ta's sudden appearance, the originally disadvantaged Changyang Hu and his group were now on an even playing field. Moreover, because of Tai Ta's existence, the winds of battle were blowing in their favor. The playing field was now sloped towards them in a short amount of time. Looking at the Luo Jian's dark and swarthy face, Jian Chen laughed. "Luo Jian, it looks like your plan to steal our monster cores will end in failure. Your monster cores will be given to us instead." Luo Jian's face grew angry as his eyes flashed dangerously. "Changyang Xiang Tian, you don't have the power to take away my monster cores." Jian Chen looked at Luo Jian with some disdain before saying, "Then let's test it out. Let's see if I have the power to snatch away your monster cores or not." Jian Chen said nothing more after that, as his body started to sway before charging quickly at Luo Jian. His hand held the iron rod and struck like a viper towards Luo Jian's chest, using the darkness of the night as its cover. A flash of killing intent went through Luo Jian's eyes as he held his cyan-colored sword up. He brandished it in an imposing manner before slashing at Jian Chen. Since Luo Jian was not only a middle-ranked saint, but also had wind-attributed saint force, his attacks were even faster than before. So much that whenever he swung his blade an after-image would appear. Seeing the sword come down towards his head, Jian Chen dodged to the side, and continued to thrust the iron rod towards Luo Jian's chest. Luo Jian's face changed as he realized the speed the iron rod was traveling at was extremely high. At that critical moment, his sword was too far out to bring it back to protect himself, but his reaction speed wasn't too slow either. Reabsorbing the wind saint force into his body, he forced his body to move backwards and bring back his sword. Luo Jian's speed became faster. The moment Jian Chen's iron touched Luo Jian's clothes, he had already escaped from Jian Chen's range of attack. As soon as he had escaped Jian Chen's range, he immediately started to gather the Saint Force into his hands again to slash at Jian Shen again with the sword. Luo Jian's attack was fairly simple, but to Jian Chen's eyes, it was a mess of an attack. Not a single amount of technique or finesse was shown. However, Jian Shen still didn't dare to belittle it too much. Jian Shen leapt into the air to dodge Luo Jian's sword. Immediately springing off from a tree trunk, he flew towards Luo Jian, his arms shaking, causing a faint mirror image to appear behind him. Jian Chen's arm was already traveling at high speeds, and the iron rod was traveling at the speed of lightning towards Luo Jian, so even the naked eye wouldn't be able to see it. Luo Jian's eyes widened in realization as the iron rod had already reached him. This time Luo Jian was unable to defend himself from Jian Chen's attack, nor was he able to dodge in time, resulting in the iron rod piercing deeply into his chest. Luo Jian's face hardened as he stared at the impaled iron rod within him, a dumbfounded expression appearing on his face. Not only was there a tinge of disbelief on his face, but despair and fear as well. When the iron rod had pierced into him, he had been unable to mount any type of resistance against it. He had no defense, due to the iron rod being a lot faster in speed than he had been able to react to. Even if he was a wind attribute saint, the iron rod had still skewered straight through him, causing a fatal injury. What followed afterwards was beyond everyone's expectations. The moment Jian Chen's iron rod had pierced into Luo Jian's chest, everyone had stopped moving. Then, a pure amount of Saint Force transferred from the iron rod into Luo Jian's body. With the removal of the rod, the support disappeared, and Luo Jian dropped onto the ground. When Jian Shen had sent his Saint Force-infused soul into Luo Jian's body, it was as if his body had exploded. The energy rippled through Luo Jian's body like an energy wave, wreaking havoc within his organs. PFF. Luo Jian immediately spit out a mouthful of blood. The fierce pain he was feeling inside his body was strange and unknown to him. He let loose a blood-curdling scream as he rolled on the ground. Luo Jian's scream was abnormally desolate and immediately caught the attention of all those still fighting. However, as their eyes looked at the rolling Luo Jian, everyone except Tai Ta was stunned into silence. What they were watching caused them no small amount of shock, and many of them still couldn't believe their eyes. Even after finishing off Luo Jian, Jian Shen didn't consider letting the group of robbers go. Holding his iron rod as he stood in the middle, he thought that it was lucky that he had met his older brother Jianghu now. If he had met Jianghu later, then Jian Shen was afraid that his brother would have lost all of his monster cores to Luo Jian's group and been left with a heavy injury. With Jian Shen entering the battle, the opposition no longer had the upper hand. Although Jian Shen wasn't a saint like everyone else, he undoubtedly was the most powerful amongst everyone present. In his past life, Jian Shen was a traveling wanderer who had practiced the way of the sword, to the point where he had reached perfection with it. His moves were hard to detect since he moved so fast that it was inconceivable at some points. People who were relying on only their eyes wouldn't be able to see him. Since Jian Shen was only using an iron rod, his true strength could not be brought out. The opponents in front of him were mere students with little battle experience. With his extraordinary sword knowledge, he could quickly end the battle. Until the end of the fight, no one had realized that the weapon Jian Shen was using wasn't actually a saint weapon, but actually just a common iron rod. After the fight, all of the injured students that took part in the robbery sat down on the ground. Each one of them had a different type of wound on different spots, and they all looked at Jian Shen with terror. Looking at the 8 youths on the floor, although Jianghu and his team of 4 were heavily injured, they couldn't help but reveal the joy of victory while looking at Jian Shen with stares of respectful admiration. Jianghu, I didn't think you'd unexpectedly have such an amazingly strong fourth brother. His strength really leaves me astonished. That's right, Jianghu. Although we heard about your fourth brother's strength a long time ago, I didn't think that he was this amazing until now. Even the middle-level Saint Luo Jian was defeated by him. If it weren't for your fourth brother's help, I'm afraid that our group wouldn't have been able to protect the monster cores we worked so hard to get. The 3 youths and Jianghu had a decent relationship with each other. Each one of them sighed in joy as they excitedly discussed the recent events. At this moment, Jian Shen arrived by Jianghu's side and looked at his wounds. With some concern he asked, "Big brother, do you have any serious injuries?" Hearing this, Changyang shook his head absent-mindedly. Looking at Jian Shen with joy and surprise, he replied, "I'm fine, just fine. It's only a small wound. Don't forget, your older brother has the Earth-attributed Saint Force, which improves my defenses by a lot." Changyang paused for a bit and then asked, "That's right, fourth brother, how did you come across the third region? I remember that before we entered the forest, your strength was still before the saint level. Also, how did you become so amazing, for you to even defeat Luo Jian?" Changyang asked curiously. Jian Shen laughed and said, "Big brother, this type of situation should be explained later over a nice and slow talk. Right now, we still have to take care of the problem in front of us." Jian Shen swept his gaze over at the several students who were on the ground. "Big brother, how do you think we should punish these guys?" Giving the question some thought, he said, "Fourth brother, this should be resolved by you. If it weren't for you, I'm afraid our group of 4 would have had all of our monster cores stolen." Jian Shen's face had a deep smile on it as he said, "In that case, there's no need to be merciful to them. At the very least, we should collect all of their monster cores from their space belts." Jian Shen's suggestion was quickly approved by everyone, and so under the poisonous and hateful glares of Luo Jian's group, they quickly grabbed all of the space belts and collected the monster cores inside. After checking their inventories, the 8 of them had a total of 130 monster cores. Seeing such a number, even Jian Shen was astonished by the amount. Changyang exclaimed in admiration, "I didn't think that they would have this many monster cores. It looks like they robbed many people before us. Otherwise, they wouldn't have been able to kill so many monsters in a span of 3 days with their strength." Jian Shen nodded his head in approval before saying, "Big brother, let's split the cores into 6 parts so that we each get an equal share." "That's no good." Jian Shen turned towards the new speaker, a youth from Changyang's team, Changyang Xiang Tian. "The only reason we were able to obtain these monster cores was because of you and your fellow comrade here. We didn't do anything at all, so you shouldn't split the cores with us and keep it among the 2 of you." The student's suggestion was quickly approved by the other 2 students. One of them immediately said, "Oz is right. Changyang Xiang Tian, if it weren't for you and your friend, the strength of US4 wouldn't have been enough to win. I'm afraid we wouldn't have even been able to protect our own monster cores. But now that our monster cores are safe from their grasp, we are satisfied. The monster cores you got from Luo Jian and his friends are something we don't want." "Right, Changyang Xiang Tian, you were able to get these monster cores with the combined strength of you and your friend. How could we be shameless enough to divide this up?" Jian Shen's eyes flickered with a bright glow as he looked at their faces, searching for any signs of falsity. However, he could only see sincere honesty, with absolutely no traces of dishonesty. His respect for the 3 grew tremendously, but he truly did admire his older brother the most. He didn't think his older brother would be able to find 3 friends with such good personalities like this. Although Changyang had the body and brain of a tiger, Jian Shen understood that his brother was not at all stupid. Jian Shen laughed and said, "Everyone had contributed to this situation. If it weren't for you guys stalling them, if they had somehow joined forces with Luo Jian to attack me, I'm afraid that I would have lost then. Let's go with this. Tai Ta and I will take half of the monster cores, and you guys will take the rest and divide it amongst yourselves. That should be fine, right?" That's, Changyang's eyes went wide. He was put in a state of silent shock as he would have never in a million years thought that Jian Shen would be able to defeat Luo Jian using only a rusty iron rod, and if this didn't happen before his very own eyes, he wouldn't have believed it even if he was beaten to death. At the same time, Darian and the twins looked at the iron rod in Changyang's hands. The 3 of them were in disbelief, and then looked at Jian Shen as if he was a monster. Seeing the incredulous looks on their faces, Jian Shen laughed and said, "With the combined powers of me and Tai Ta, there were no magical beasts that were a match for us in the 2nd region, so we decided to move on to the 3rd region." Hearing this, Changyang and the other 3 couldn't believe their ears. The second region was filled with Class 1 magical beasts. Although they were weaker and had low attack power, even the average saint would find surviving in the forest a difficult task, and Jian Shen was still obviously not a saint yet. To say the second region was no longer a challenge, even Jianghu and his friends would curse Jian Shen's absurd strength. After a while, Jianghu and his friends finally recovered their senses. Jianghu continued to ask, "Fourth brother, you're not even a saint yet and you're already this amazing. When the day comes and you become a saint, I really can't guess how much stronger you'll become." Jianghu shook his head in awe. "Right, fourth brother, when do you think you'll become a saint?" Muttering more to himself, "I'm currently at the peak of the 10th layer. After this forest exercise, I'll aim to become a saint." Jianghu let out a breath of air in surprise and shock as he looked at Jian Shen. "Fourth brother, you're simply too amazing for words. Not even a few months ago, you were a new student at Kargath Academy who was only at the 8th layer. I didn't think that you would reach the peak of the 10th layer in such a short amount of time." Hearing this, Darien and the twins couldn't believe it and their view of Jian Shen completely changed. The strength Jian Shen had shown was ridiculous, his cultivation speed was fast, and could border the line of the unimaginable. Jian Shen was definitely a genius among geniuses. At this moment, the three friends of Jianghu quickly came to a decision that, in the future, they would have to treat him well and avoid offending him. Jian Shen laughed carefreely. "Big brother, I've noticed that within the third region, many people are resorting to stealing monster cores from others. How did this happen?" Jianghu exhaled before saying, "I don't know who started this myself, but it's said that during the second day, someone started to steal monster cores relying on the fact that he had an enormous amount of people behind him. After this news spread, everyone in the third region started to follow suit, forming groups to rob cores. After all, Class 2 magical beasts are rare in comparison to Class 1 magical beasts, and are even harder to kill. Killing one beast would only get you one, but stealing from another is much easier than hunting, and with good luck, one would get a lot of cores as well. So up until now, all the students started to steal from each other in the third region. Many people have had their hard-earned monster cores stolen away from them when they were alone or were smaller in numbers. The people who were injured decided to quit early, reducing the numbers in the area drastically. Why don't the teachers that are secretly hidden care about what was happening? Tai Ta asked. As long as it isn't a life-threatening injury or a critical point between life or death, then the hidden teachers won't show up. After all, the reason why we are in the forest hunting magical beasts is so we can temper ourselves, not to mention that we are being tested on how we can unite when being robbed. Things like this happen often in the Tianyuan continent. They're only letting us experience this sooner rather than later," said the twins. "Ah!" Tai Ta suddenly exclaimed in realization. Jian Shen let loose a strange smile as he looked at his older brother and his friends. "Since other people have the audacity to rob us of our monster cores, why can't we rob them first? Are you guys with me on this?" The group's eyes went bright as they heard Jian Shen. "Fine, we'll do it. Changyang Xiang Tian, we will follow you," Darien said as he stood up and stared at Jian Shen, the heroic spirit reflected in his voice. "Not bad, before our strength was lacking, and could only run away blindly. But now that Jian Shen is here, even if we meet a middle-rank saint, victory isn't impossible. Since this is the final night, let's have some fun with this." Aoba and Oz laughed. "Alright, fourth brother, your big brother will listen to you," Jianghu said happily. Tai Ta didn't have an opinion, as he had decided to follow Jian Shen without question for a while now. After everyone had eaten their fill and discussed their plans, they decided to let the twins search the surroundings for targets, while the rest waited for their return. The twins soon came back and reported that they saw a group of 5 people nearby. Jian Shen immediately followed the twins towards where they had reported seeing them. When Jian Shen's group had reached the place, the 5 people were preparing themselves to rest and were caught unprepared by Jian Shen's sudden attack. Since the group was only at the primary saint level, they were quickly defeated by Jian Shen and his group. However, they didn't have that many monster cores, only having around 20 or so. After taking the monster cores, they didn't continue to harass them and immediately left the area. For the entire night, Jian Shen and the others didn't sleep at all. Instead, they looked around the forest for more targets. There weren't many people in the third region by now, and ever since he had started his search, he had only come across 3 different groups. But what he and the others found amusing was that halfway through the night, Jian Shen's group had came across another group who had the same idea they had, and so they had immediately started to fight. Both sides had 6 people each, and the other group even had 2 middle saints whose strength could be considered pretty strong. However, those 2 ended up being stuck against Jian Shen and Tai Ta. In the end, Jian Shen had come out victorious against his opponent, and gained 150 Class 2 monster cores as a reward. It would seem that many people had had their monster cores taken by this group. After the third battle, aside from Jian Shen, everyone else was exhausted and could not continue fighting anymore. With no other choice, they spent the rest of the night searching for a secret place to hide and sleep. Although Jian Shen and Tai Ta had wanted to continue, the other 4 weren't in any shape to, and needed the 2 of them to stay behind and protect them against any surprise attacks. Without saying, Jian Shen and the group had had an overwhelming harvest, excluding the first group with their 20 monster cores. The other 2 groups had 70 cores and 150 cores respectively. So in total, they now had 260 cores. Seeing this many monster cores, Jian Shen was starting to suspect that this was already half of the total amount of Class 2 monster cores in the third region. The night passed peacefully, and the group started to travel towards the outside of the forest. With some herbal medicine, Jianghu and the others' wounds were starting to heal slowly. Back when they had first entered the forest, the school administration had already prepared these medicines inside of their space belts. At the moment, Jianghu and his friends were all wearing well-made wolf pelts that made them look as if they had no injuries at all. The wolf pelts were the ones that Jian Shen and Tai Ta had made from when they had slaughtered that pack of wolves. They had collected quite a large amount of them. Chapter 47. Returning to the academy, the group of 6 headed to the edge of the forest, now that they had completed their 3 days. If they could protect the monster cores until they reached the outside, then they would be able to finish the assignment perfectly. And since the academy would not take the cores, they would be able to use it for themselves. Traveling on the road, Jian Shen and the rest were very cautious. This was the crucial moment, since they could be ambushed at any given time. Jian Shen and Tai Ta were still full of life, but Jianghu and the others were not in the best shape. If they were to be attacked by another strong group, then a fierce battle wouldn't be avoidable, which was what Jian Shen wanted to avoid. Jian Shen walked down the road with Tai Ta behind him while the rest followed in a straight line as they reached to the part of the forest where the white enchantments of the forest rippled outwards. With the end of the third day, the enchantment had suddenly transformed to help the students who were lost to find their way here. Jian Shen's soul was lashing out around him as he checked his surroundings. The third region was not as quiet as the second region. Not only did they have to protect themselves from magical beasts, but they also had to protect themselves from other students. Other students were waiting around for the perfect moment to strike. So because of that, the closer one got to the entrance, the more dangerous it became. After all, the enchantment was showing a hole in itself to help lead students out, so many of them were trying to leave the forest and made themselves an open target for those other students waiting to ambush them. A few hours passed. Jian Shen and Tai Ta were getting closer and closer to the third region's exit. The whole journey had been fairly peaceful, although at regular intervals, they'd encounter a magical beast carcass. Sometimes, there would even be 2 to 3 magical beast corpses lying in the same location. A few hours of rushing later, Jian Shen's group of people finally arrived outside of the third region's exit. They smoothly passed through and entered the second region. At this moment, everyone could not help but sigh in relief. They all understood that their monster cores were secured, because after leaving the third region, no matter whether or not others had gathered the required 2 monster cores, their task was complete. There was nobody here that would dare to steal their monster cores. I hadn't imagined that the journey would be so peaceful. This was really against my expectations. Jianghu happily smiled, his tone also carrying a hint of excitement. Aoba also happily said, that's right, and here I'd thought that we'd fall victim to some surprise attacks. I didn't think that the path would have been so calm. It really goes against all expectations. Darian reached his hand out to touch his space belt and smiled. I guess the people stealing monster cores in the third region had suffered from injuries, and didn't have the energy to keep stealing from others on the road. In addition, most of the people probably have the same mindset as us, only stressing self-defense. As long as we safely leave the third region, we'll be satisfied. None of us are interested in the idea of stealing monster cores anymore. Yeah, that's right. What you said makes sense. Tai Ta nodded in agreement. Jianshan shook his head and said, the situation is not necessarily as you think it is. Actually, throughout the whole journey, there were still some people lying in wait along the way in hidden places ready to ambush us. You guys just didn't notice them. Those people who were hiding in the darkness perhaps noticed that we have a large number of people, or they didn't have the ability to discern our strength, so they couldn't determine if they could destroy us. That's why they didn't make any movements towards us. Otherwise, there's no way we could have safely left the third region. Hearing this, the people's expressions all changed. Changyang Hu let out a long breath and said, it's a good thing fourth brother made sure we put on perfect acts of being completely undamaged. Otherwise, if the people knew that the four of us were injured, then I'm afraid we wouldn't have been so fortunate. Hearing this, Aoba and the others nodded in agreement, and looked at Jian Shen with gazes filled with respect. Alright, we should hurry up and leave. After we return back to the academy, you guys need to properly tend to your wounds. The group of 6 continued to walk towards the first region. As they got closer to the exit, the nearby academy gradually entered their lines of vision. Although there were definitely many people that had been unable to endure the task and gave up on it in the middle, at least 1,000 people had entered the forest together. Even if more than half had given up, there were still at least a few hundreds of people remaining. However, the mere hundreds of people spread out in the enormous forest rarely met each other, so it was rare to come across others that had decided to remain in the forest. Jian Chen's gaze swept across the people around him that were similarly heading out of the first region towards the academy. He saw that most of the males sported naked torsos, and were covered with wounds. However, without any exception, all the people were in sorry states. Their naked torsos were covered with dirt, and their faces could not be discerned with all the filth covering them. Only some of the females still wore the academy uniforms. However, every single one of the uniforms had become beyond dirty, and there were tears all over the clothing. Even a beggar's clothing was better than theirs. In addition, they used wide leaves to cover the parts that their clothes didn't, making them look like extremely sorry figures. Amongst all the people, there were also a few people who had serious leg injuries, rendering them unable to walk. They were being supported by their companions the whole way, and approached the outside of the forest, one step after another. Perhaps it was because there were so many people present here, but there were absolutely no magical beasts in the vicinity. It was even safer than before. Soon after, Jian Chen's group followed the direction the enchantment in the sky pointed to in order to exit the first region, and they finally exited the forest. Outside stood the vice headmaster, Chang Bai-en, wearing a white changpao, his back straight. Behind him stood a few teachers with indifferent expressions. Further behind them was a large group of nearly 1,000 Kargath Academy students. They were split into 2 groups. The group on the right had many more times people than the other group. Among them, some people were wearing academy uniforms that were dirty, but had very few tears. On the whole, they seemed to be in excellent and undamaged conditions. The other group of people seemed to be in a more difficult situation. Their uniforms were all tattered, and sported quite a few bloodstains as well. Underneath the multiple rips on their clothes, it could clearly be seen that they sported many scars on their bodies. The people in the left group only had around 200 people. All of them were in sorry states. Majority of the people there were wearing clothes made of bark or beast skins, and there were quite a few people that had naked torsos. However, all the people that walked out of the forest were organized by a teacher to join the group on the left. Afterwards, Jian Chen's group sat on the grass quietly in wait. By this point, he had already understood that all the people in the left group were those that had stayed in the forest for the entire 3 days, and had just left the forest today. On the other hand, the people in the right group were all those that had escaped before the 3 days were up. According to the Academy's regulations, no matter whether or not they had fulfilled the requirement of obtaining 2 monster cores, they still had failed their tasks. As he swept his gaze in a circle, Jian Shen discovered that many people in the group he was with had melancholic expressions. There were others that looked at certain people with looks of deep hatred, looking like they would spit out flames from their eyes. At that moment, Jian Shen sensed something. He turned around to look behind him, and saw 2 people with dirty faces and wearing clothing made of beast skin supporting a student in similar attire. The 2 were currently glaring at Jian Shen with poisonous hatred, as if burning him into a crisp with their gazes alone. A strong killing intent. After Jian Shen closely examined the people, his mouth formed a hint of a sneer. He already recognized that the person was actually Luo Jian. Although Jian Shen knew that after what happened the previous night, he had definitely wronged Luo Jian, Jian Shen didn't pay much mind to it. In terms of strength, he wasn't below Luo Jian at all. Once he was able to condense a saint weapon and become a saint, Luo Jian would no longer pose any threat to him. In terms of family backgrounds, although Jian Shen wasn't completely sure of Changyang clan's strength, they were in no means weak in any sort of aspect. Luo Jian was the son of the leader of a major powerful clan in Forbidden City, but in Jian Shen's opinion, there was no way the Luo clan would bother harassing him over such a trivial matter. After all, Luo Jian had only been injured by Jian Shen because of the training event that the academy had sent them on. In addition, the situation at that time had been because Luo Jian had first attacked his older brother's group. Afterwards, once all the people had walked out of the forest, Jian Shen's group had already increased to 300 to 400 people. At this moment, the vice headmaster Chang Baiyan walked up to the front of the crowd. He looked around at the group of figures that had obviously suffered through difficult situations. He smiled, and loudly said, "Very good. As expected, none of you have disappointed me. I hadn't imagined that this event to hunt magical beasts and stay in the forest for 3 days would have more people remaining this time compared to all the previous times this event has been held. Now, I want everyone to maintain their current formations, and begin walking back towards the academy." Afterwards, the entire 2 groups maintained their exact formations and quickly advanced towards the academy. In the middle of the journey, when they encountered a small river, everyone stopped to wash their faces clean, and then continued forward. Very soon, the group of students began to approach the academy, and in the distance, they noticed that a tall platform had been erected in the center of the sports field. The group of people stopped in front of the platform, and the vice headmaster Chang Baiyan, as well as a few teachers, walked up to it. The vice headmaster sat in the chairperson's place with a straightforward and imposing manner, and calmly said, "The magical beast hunting competition occurring once every 3 years has now officially ended. According to the Academy's regulations, after the task has been completed, we will now hand out awards. I would like to now invite all the people who had stayed in the forest for the entire 3 days and have gathered 2 monster cores to simultaneously step forwards." As soon as the vice headmaster finished speaking, 100 or so people immediately walked out of the crowd. I will now first count the Class 1 monster cores. Students who have hunted Class 1 magical beasts, please come up to the platform for the number of monster cores in your possession to be counted. The vice headmaster continued. Following this, all the students that had killed Class 1 magical beasts, including Jian Shen and Tai Ta, all walked up to the platform. There stood a teacher specifically assigned to count and record the number of monster cores that the students had earned. Chapter 48, Mu Tian. Among the 100 or so people, the majority of them were below the saint level, and had performed the event in the second region. When the students that had Class 1 monster cores walked up, only a bit over 30 people remained. This made the students who did not know much about the third region's conditions puzzled. Although the third region had Class 2 magical beasts, they all had low attack powers. To a saint that could condense a saint weapon, although it may not be possible for him, her to fight against the magical beast alone, as long as a few people work together, hunting magical beasts within the third region shouldn't be very difficult to do. It should definitely be easier than a student that had not yet reached Saint level killing a Class 1 magical beast. After all, the Saint weapons that Saints had were extremely powerful, and far surpassed those other ordinary weapons. Logically, the chances of students completing their task in the third region should definitely be much higher than those in the second region. However, nobody had imagined that the event would end up with such results. In the third region, only a pathetic 30 or so students had completed their task. This was much less than the people who had finished in the second region. When the first student arrived in front of the teacher inspecting the monster cores, he directly reached into his space belt and lightly placed all of his monster cores on the table. This student only took out 3 monster cores total. Casually gazing at the 3 Class 1 monster cores, the approximately 50-year-old teacher in charge of inspecting the monster cores nodded and said, not bad. You qualify as passing. What's your name? Teacher, my name is Cheng Yinfeng. The youth that was being inspected excitedly said. The 2 words, not bad, had already confirmed the fact that the teacher was praising him. Being complimented by the teacher was the greatest honor to him. The teacher picked up his pen and recorded the information on a piece of paper, then said, Go return your space belt to the academy. Take your monster cores. Also, this is a badge that represents your glory. You must take good care of it. The teacher pulled out a badge from underneath the table, and handed it to the student. The student happily agreed. He carefully and tenderly took the badge, and then he walked off the platform in extremely high spirits. Next. Afterwards, students walked up in succession and handed their monster cores to the teacher for appraisal, and at the same time, were recorded. The process was quite fast, and in the blink of an eye, dozens of people had already passed. The fewest number of monster cores among them so far had been 2, and the greatest number had taken out 8, which had made the appraising elder shocked for a moment. At this moment, a handsome youth with an uncommon air walked up to get his monster cores inspected. The youth had a small scar on his forehead, and it was most likely a recent wound from the forest, since the scar still had a hint of blood on it. The youth calmly walked up to the elder, and quietly took off his space belt. He then began to take out monster cores, and placed them on the table one by one. As he was removing them, the table was soon filled with 6 Class 1 monster cores, yet he showed no signs of stopping. He continued to leisurely pull out monster core after monster core from his space belt. His movements were not at all rushed, and the expression on his face was indifferent, giving off the impression that he was a very steadfast person. When the youth first took out 6 monster cores, the inspecting teacher finally returned to his senses. A smile slowly formed on his face, and he lightly nodded while looking at the youth with an expression of admiration. Soon, the youth had already pulled out 10 monster cores. At this moment, the expression of the elder inspecting the monster cores finally changed. His gaze towards the youth was no longer one of admiration, but one of shock. For a person that had not yet reached Saint level to have managed to kill and retrieve monster cores from 10 Class 1 magical beasts was definitely not an easy task. In addition, the youth still showed no signs of stopping, signifying to everyone present that he still had not finished removing all of the monster cores from his space belt. The students lined up being this youth had already been shocked speechless at the sight of him pulling out so many monster cores. They thought back to how much energy they had consumed in the forest just to retrieve 2 to 3 monster cores. To them, this had already been quite an amazing achievement. Many of them had even felt quite proud of this. Yet the youth in front of them had pulled out many times more monster cores than they had received within the last 3 days in a single breath. How could they not be shocked? Having fought against the Class 1 magical beasts quite a few times, they had been left with a deep realization that without reaching Saint level, using an iron weapon to kill Class 1 magical beasts with such thick skin was extremely difficult. The youth did not pay any mind to the onlookers' expressions, as if he didn't see them. His movements had still not stopped, and he continued to pull out monster cores from his space belt one after another without a pause. Soon, there were already 15 monster cores piled onto the table, yet the youth still didn't show the slightest trace of stopping. He was still equally unhurried as before, and he very calmly continued to take out more monster cores from his space belt. At this moment, all the teachers on the platform were gazing at the youth in shock and disbelief. For a person not yet a saint to have killed more than 10 magical beasts within 3 days would perhaps be possible if he worked together with 5 to 6 people, but to have hunted so many magical beasts in 3 days alone was really something the teachers felt was impossible, unless those magical beasts were all seriously wounded. Sitting on top of the platform, the vice headmaster Chang Bai-en smiled and said, "His name seems to be Mu Tian. He only entered the academy last year. After only a single year, he went from the 8th Saint Force layer to the peak of the 10th layer. This speed is quite good." It said that he even tried to attack a saint. Although he ultimately failed, it has to be admitted that the Mu clan really did send a good young successor this time. The vice headmaster Chang Bai-en paused for a bit, then shifted his gaze towards the lined-up Changyang Xiang Tian and Tai Ta and muttered, "I really anticipate Changyang Xiang Tian's and Tai Ta's harvests." It said that the two of them had actually ran to the 3rd region to hunt Class 2 magical beasts on the last day. Their powers are clearly not at the saint level yet. Heavens, to have relied on iron weapons to hunt Class 2 magical beasts, that is really too unfathomable. If I hadn't personally witnessed the two of them kill a completely undamaged Class 2 magical beast, I would not dare to believe that such a situation was true. It seems that not only did the headmaster accept a good apprentice, Lore City's Changyang clan, which has been silent for so long, will soon return to their former glory because of Changyang Xiang Tian in the near future. Only after the youth had taken out 23 Class 1 monster cores did he finally stop. He calmly looked at the inspecting elder taking notes, and said, "Teacher, these are the monster cores I retrieved." The elder in charge of the inspection swept a glance at the 23 monster cores and let out a long breath. He looked at the youth with bright eyes full of emotions and asked, "What's your name?" "Mu Tian." The youth replied in an indifferent tone. The elder's gaze gradually became more serious as he continued to ask, "Mu Tian, did you gain these monster cores by yourself, or did you work together with others for them?" Mu Tian's expression did not change, as he had long since expected this would happen. "Teacher, these monster cores were gained by my hard work alone." Hearing this, the elder's expression immediately changed. He looked intensely at Mu Tian with an expression beyond admiration, then smiled and nodded, "Good. Good. Good. Mu Tian, right? Very good. Your results are extremely outstanding. I hope that you continue to work hard in the future." The elder did not ask how Mu Tian had gained the 23 monster cores. That was not important at all. The important part was that he knew that these monster cores had been gained through Mu Tian's hard work alone. After all, in the Tian Yuan continent, strength represented everything. As long as one could achieve the final victory, no matter what kind of dishonest methods were used, nobody would say anything about it. Hearing the elder's words of praise, Mu Tian could not help but smile. At that moment, the elder took about a sky blue belt and badge. He handed them over to Mu Tian and said, "This is a space belt you had previously given us, and this is your badge. Take proper care of them." Mu Tian calmly accepted the space belt and the badge of glory, and reinserted the 23 monster cores into his space belt, before walking off the platform. From beginning to end, Mu Tian had not shown a single trace of arrogance or pride. He always had the same, indifferent expression. Jian Chen's gaze followed Mu Tian until he walked off the platform. In his heart, he had already committed Mu Tian's name to memory. Based on his intuition, he felt that Mu Tian was probably quite a complex person, and hadn't used his full potential yet either. In the future, he would definitely accomplish much more. It was simply still unknown which of the two paths he would choose to advance on. Because Mu Tian had taken out over 20 monster cores, the following students didn't induce any type of reactions when they removed their monster cores. Majority of them had only the minimum 2 monster cores. The number of people that had more than 2 was very few. Aside from Mu Tian's 23 monster cores, the highest harvest had been the previous 8 monster cores. The inspection went by quickly, and it was soon Jian Chen's turn. At this moment, the gazes of the vice headmaster sitting in the chairperson's seat, as well as a few other teachers, immediately lit up. Their eyes closely followed Jian Chen, showing expressions of extreme concentration. The vice headmaster Chang Baiyan, who had previously been reclining in his seat, could not help but straighten his back, as he gazed at Jian Chen, full of expectations. Although he knew that Jian Chen had killed quite a few magical beasts in the forest, he didn't know the exact numerical value of this, quite a few. Jian Chen calmly walked up to the elder in charge of inspecting the monster cores and lowered his head to look at the 2-meter-long table. A troubled expression showed on his face, and after some hesitation, he said, "Teacher, can you please change to a larger table?" Huh? Hearing Jian Chen's words, the elderly man who was closely inspecting paused, and asked in confusion, "What did you just say?" Seeing that the table was originally not very large, and that there were already some items of little value on top of it, Jian Chen could only show a helpless expression. This table was really too small. There was absolutely no way he could fit all of his monster cores that pretty much completely filled his space belt. "Yes, teacher. Can I please ask you to change this table to a slightly larger one? This table is too small." Jian Chen continued. Chapter 49. The shock. Hearing Jian Chen's words, all the students lined up behind him, aside from Tai Ta, showed expressions of shock. They all gave extremely strange looks at Jian Chen, and quite a few suspected that they had heard him wrong. In their opinion, if you needed to hand over your monster cores, then just hand them over. Why would you bother caring about how large the table being used was? Wasn't this simply asking for trouble? Who is that person? He's really reckless, to even ask the teacher to change tables. He's really an idiot, to dare tell Teacher Steve that the table was too small in front of so many people. The most unfathomable thing is that he wants Teacher Steve to change tables for him. Heavens, for him to confront Teacher Steve about the table being used, does he not know that Teacher Steve is the strictest teacher in all of Kargath Academy? Quite a few people began to point at Jian Chen in discussion, looking at him as if he was an idiot. The inspecting elder's expression changed, as he furrowed his brows and stared severely at Jian Chen. He snorted and then in a low voice said, "What's your name? You even tried to confront a teacher like this. This table was prepared ages ago. It's not something that can be changed just because you said it should be changed." Jian Chen's words not only irritated the inspecting teacher, even a few of the teachers judging from the back could not help but knit their brows as they looked at Jian Chen with displeased expressions. Jian Chen's words were completely disrespectful to them as teachers. Not a single one of the people even considered the fact that Jian Chen had requested for change in tables because the current table had no way of fitting all the monster cores inside his space belt. Of course, there were some teachers who were exceptions. Their demeanors were still very calm. Their faces only showed a light trace of a smile. These few were the ones who watched Jian Chen and Tai Ta viciously kill a group of blue wolf kings. At this time behind them, a beautiful girl with a pair of bright eyes stared suspiciously at Jian Chen's figure, frowning in deep thought and whispering softly, "Strange. Why do I feel that his shadow is a little familiar? Maybe I've met him somewhere." The girl's eyebrows furrowed as she thought hard. Suddenly, her eyes flashed, and a familiar figure appeared in her mind. The next moment, her eyes exposed a look of surprise accompanied by a magical color. She unconsciously shouted, "Changyang Xiang Tian, he is Changyang Xiang Tian." The girl's voice was not concealed at all, so many people heard her. The moment everyone heard the name Changyang Xiang Tian, their faces started to change as the students who had been recklessly hurling insults Changyang Xiang Tian started to shut their mouths like obedient children. Changyang Xiang Tian was a name that was prominent throughout Kargath Academy and was practically heard of by everyone. However, not many people had actually seen what he looked like, most of who did were freshmen. Jian Chen's face was rendered indistinctive with all of the mud and grime that left very little of his face unblemished. His clothes were also extremely tattered to the point of him looking like a beggar. With his current state of appearance, no one would be able to recognize him even when he was lined up in front of everyone. After hearing Changyang Xiang Tian's name, the teacher in charge of inspecting the monster cores went blank as he gave a closer look. Apparently, Changyang Xiang Tian was a name even the teacher was familiar with. However, that didn't mean that Jian Shen had the proper authority to be able to command him to bring a new table. The teacher's mouth dropped open one more time in disbelief before preparing himself to speak again, but at that moment, Biyao from the academy board called out, "Someone bring out a bigger table immediately." There was a smile on his face instead one of discontent. Instead, he was looking at Jian Shen with anticipation as if he had already guessed the reason why Jian Shen had wanted a bigger table. The vice headmaster Biyao looked as if he was 34 years old, but his prestige within Kargath Academy was exceptionally high, second only to the headmaster himself. When he had spoken, all of the teachers went silent. Aside from a few teachers, the other teachers had not understood what the vice headmaster was trying to say. To think that he had asked for a bigger table even though the original table was more than enough to register a student's monster cores count, there was just simply no use for a bigger table. Soon after, a 3-meter long and 2-meter wide table was lifted up to the stage, and the original table that had been used by the inspecting teacher was taken away. "Changyang Xiang Tian, you should be satisfied with this, right?" The inspecting teacher sat in front of the larger table. His attitude towards Jian Shen was not very amiable. It was evident that Jian Shen's request for a larger table had left an extremely bad impression on the 50 to 60-year-old teacher. Seeing that the elder's heart had some sort of prejudice against him, Jian Shen could not help but smile bitterly. He hadn't imagined that just because of something like this, the teacher would actually have something against him. This had definitely gone against his expectations, but Jian Shen didn't mind it too much. Afterwards, Jian Shen directly removed his space belt. Unlike the other students that had removed the monster cores one by one, he directly grabbed a handful of 10 monster cores and pulled them out, lightly placing them on the table. All of these monster cores were faint white in color, and were about one circle larger than the size of an adult's finger. Seeing Jian Shen pull out 10 monster cores at once, although the appraising elder was previously unsatisfied with Jian Shen's earlier actions, he could not help inwardly nodding. However, just as the appraising elder had assumed these were all the monster cores Jian Shen had, Jian Shen's hand once again reached into his space belt, and continued to pull out a great handful of monster cores. Once again, there were 10 of them in his hand. Now there were already 20 monster cores on the table in front. Seeing this, the appraising elder's eyes lit up. He looked at Jian Shen in astonishment and inwardly thought to himself, "This Changyang Xiang Tian's reputation is indeed not undeserved. Although he has not yet reached saint level, he was able to defeat a saint. It seems that he really is quite skilled." Following this, Jian Shen continued to reach into his space belt and once again pulled out a handful of monster cores to gently place onto the table. Dong dong dong, sounds rang out as the hard monster cores came into contact with the wooden table. Seeing Jian Shen once again take out 10 monster cores from his space belt, the expression of the appraising elder had instantly changed. His eyes now reflected complete shock, since by now, Jian Shen had taken out 30 monster cores, 7 more than Mu Tian had. For a student that had not yet reached saint level to have killed 30 Class 1 magical beasts within 3 days inside the forest was undoubtedly a record. Even the elder that had gone around the world and witnessed many things before could not help but be dumbstruck by disbelief. Although these magical beasts had relatively low attack power, it was by no means an easy task for a student only at the peak of the 10th Saint Force layer to kill them. When Jian Shen grabbed 30 monster cores, the teacher evaluating him became astonished, along with the other teachers behind him as they watched this inconceivable sight. Only a few teachers who had inside information on the matter had a smile on their faces while the students lined up behind him had been dumbstruck when he had pulled the 30 monster cores out. But Jian Shen didn't bother to look at the stupefied expressions on the teachers and students around him. While everyone was staring at him, his hands went into his space belt once more and grabbed another bunch of monster cores to put onto the table. When his hand refused to stop, the teachers all looked on with a sluggish expression, as the cycle repeated and he reached into his space belt and grabbed yet another handful. Soon after Jian Shen had placed a couple handsful of monster cores onto the table, the big official table was filled with monster cores. Although they were all Class 1 monster cores, because they came from different species, the cores would not be the same size or shape. Small cores were almost the size of the big toe of a person, and the biggest cores were the size of a small child's fist. Whether it was a student or teacher, both groups had been put into shock by Jian Chen. For a person who was not yet at the saint-level state to hunt and kill almost 100 Class 1 magical beasts in a span of 3 days, if someone were to try to say this to someone else, they wouldn't be believed. At this moment, aside from a small amount of people, every other person would not believe that it was Jian Chen who had killed all these magical beasts. Many people had thought that the huge amount of monster cores were a result of many people helping him collect monster cores or that he had stolen them. The consensus was that he could not have killed all those Class 1 magical beasts by himself. Seeing the official table being covered by a little under 100 monster cores from Jian Chen, the teacher in charge of counting them let out a deep breath. Although in his heart he thought that Jian Chen had to have fought many other groups for their monster cores. He had to admire Jian Chen's strength, however, even when it came to dishonorable acts like thievery. The teachers would not care since this is a common event in the Tianyuan continent. Seeing almost 100 Class 1 monster cores from Jian Chen, the vice headmaster Biyao let loose an incredulous look. He knew in his heart that the reason why the second region had so many less people hunting for monster cores was because they had been robbed by Jian Chen. There was no doubt that Jian Chen had stolen all of the monster cores from someone else, otherwise, everyone would have passed the test with the monster cores they earned by a legitimate show of strength from killing magical beasts. With this recent development, the vice headmaster Biyao was quite emotional today as even his heart shook. Though at the same time, there was a small amount of doubt. Could it be that Jian Chen and Tai Ta could easily kill magical beasts without even adding qi to weapons? Were they just not using cultivation anymore? Unexpectedly, Jian Chen and Tai Ta had both killed around 100 magical beasts over the span of the last 3 days. The look in the teacher's eye was quite complicated. Soon after he had started to count the monster cores on the table, the teacher didn't ask how Jian Chen had acquired these monster cores since the definite conclusion was already clear in his mind. Chapter 50. Over 100 Class 1 monster cores. The monster cores were quickly counted. The elder in charge of the appraisal said, "There is a total of 98 monster cores here. This is your space belt, please return the Academy space belt now." The elder handed Jian Chen an emerald green space belt. This was the space belt that Jian Chen's father, Changyang Ba, had gifted him when he had left the Changyang clan. Jian Chen looked at the Academy space belt in his hands for a bit, and after some hesitation said, "Teacher, for the time being, please take care of my belt here. After this evaluation ends, I will return the Academy space belt." Hearing this, the elder knit his brows, and asked in confusion, "What?" Perhaps it was because Jian Chen alone had gained nearly 100 monster cores, but the elder's attitude towards Jian Chen had clearly changed. "Teacher, I still have Class 2 monster cores in my space belt, so I still need to take part in the Class 2 monster cores evaluation later," Jian Chen plainly said. Right now, the evaluation was only being held for Class 1 monster cores. The evaluation for Class 2 monster cores wouldn't begin until after this one finished. Is that so? You still have Class 2 monster cores?" Hearing this, the elder had disbelief written on his face, and he looked at Jian Chen with suspicion. It wasn't only the elder, the other teachers sitting on the platform were currently looking at Jian Chen with identical expressions. Jian Chen nodded, "Yes, teacher." Hearing this, the elder let out a deep breath. His gaze towards Jian Chen grew solemn. Only now did he realize that he had really underestimated the rumors that had been going around about Changyang Xiangtian. However, he didn't bother wasting his breath on this matter, and waved his hand, "All right, store away these monster cores. You can continue to attend the second round of evaluations." Afterwards, Jian Chen placed the 100 or so monster cores back into his space belt and left the platform. However now, both the teachers on the platform and the students surrounding him looked at Jian Chen with completely different expressions. Their gazes were complicated, mixed with jealousy, envy, and even some with disdain. After walking off the platform, Jian Chen didn't rejoin the crowd. Instead, he walked up to the people waiting for the Class 2 monster cores evaluation that were currently lined up in wait. All the students awaiting evaluation had already reached Saint level, and aside from Changyanghu's group, all of them looked at Jian Chen with expressions of shock and doubts as he walked up to them. They hadn't even met Jian Shen in the third region, and it was obvious that they found it extremely abnormal for a person not yet a saint to be able to show off Class 2 monster cores. They really found it extremely hard to believe that Jian Shen had actually entered the third region and killed Class 2 magical beasts. In addition, he had at least managed to gain 2 Class 2 monster cores. Lined up behind Jian Shen was Tai Ta. After Jian Shen walked off, Tai Ta also arrived in front of the appraising elder. At this point, Tai Ta, being the Kargath Academy's headmaster's apprentice, was no longer a secret. All the teachers recognized him. When Tai Ta walked up, the appraising elder could not help but smile as he said, "Tai Ta, I wonder what your profits were like this time?" Tai Ta laughed, but did not say anything in reply. Just as Jian Shen had done, he reached his hand into his space belt and directly pulled out a large handful of monster cores, before lightly placing them on the table. Tai Ta's fists were slightly larger than Jian Shen's, so each one held 14 to 15 monster cores every time. Seeing the 14 to 15 monster cores on the table, the appraising elder began to smile, as he inwardly thought to himself, as expected of the person that the headmaster has his eye on. Although he has the heart and body of a tiger and seemed to lack shrewdness, his talent really cannot help but make one sigh in admiration. After taking out 14 to 15 monster cores, Tai Ta's movements didn't stop at all. He once again reached into his space belt to pull out a fistful of monster cores. The students and teachers all stared at the table as gradually, the number of monster cores increased more and more, until there were multiple dozens. Only after Tai Ta had finally taken out a little under 100 monster cores did he finally stop. Seeing all the monster cores he had gained, Tai Ta laughed in a straightforward manner and happily said, "Teacher, these are the monster cores I have gained." At that moment, all the teachers and students in the vicinity were shocked speechless. They all stared at the slightly under 100 monster cores piled on the table with expressions of disbelief. The appraising elder let out a long breath, and then looked at Tai Ta intensely, and slowly said, "Good, good. Tai Ta, you've done very well, and have not lost any face for your master." Saying this, the elder lowered his head and began to count the monster cores. He did not inquire how Tai Ta had gained those monster cores. In his heart, he had already linked together Tai Ta's means of collecting the monster cores with Jian Shen's. The elder quickly finished counting the monster cores and said, "There are a total of 97 monster cores here." Saying this, the elder recorded it into his notebook. After he had finished taking note, the elder took out an exquisite, extremely well-made, black space belt adorned with a few gems, and handed it over along with the badge of glory to Tai Ta, and said, "Tai Ta, this is the space belt that you had left in our care, as well as the badge of glory that you have earned. Collect your monster cores, and then return the Academy space belt to the Academy." It was obvious from a single glance that this high-grade space belt had been given to Tai Ta by the headmaster after he had become the headmaster's apprentice. Otherwise, a child born into a commoner family like him would have absolutely no way of purchasing such a high-grade item like this space belt. Although these types of space belts were not uncommon in Tianyin continent, it was not something that ordinary people could own. Tai Ta's gaze was locked onto the black space belt for a while, before he shook his head and said, "Teacher, I would like to keep this space belt under your care. I still have Class 2 monster cores." "What? You also have Class 2 monster cores?" Hearing this, the appraising elder looked at him with an extremely shocked expression, with a hint of disbelief hidden as well. Hearing Tai Ta's words, the other teachers that were sitting on the platform exchanged glances of disbelief with each other. They hadn't imagined that after Jian Shen, there would be another student not yet at saint level that had managed to gain Class 2 monster cores. That appraising elder hesitated for a bit before replying, "Tai Ta, did you go to the third region?" Although the elder's question was overstepping his responsibilities, he could not ignore the strong feelings of curiosity in his heart. Even though he had already guessed the answer, he would definitely not dare to believe it unless Tai Ta confirmed the situation. Tai Ta nodded, and spoke in a muffled voice, "Yes, I went to the third region." The appraising elder continued to ask, "Did you gain your Class 2 monster cores from killing magical beasts?" Despite the fact he was far overstepping his boundaries, nobody tried to stop him, since it was not only the elder that was extremely curious to know the answer. Even all of the teachers on the platform felt the same way, and they wanted a clear-cut confirmation. A portion of it was gained from Changyang Xiang Tian and I killing magical beasts. Tai Ta had no intention of hiding anything, but he only said half of the story. Hearing this, the elder asked in shock and disbelief, "What? You're saying that you and Changyang Xiang Tian killed Class 2 magical beasts?" Tai Ta nodded and replied, "Yes." This answer made all of the teachers on the platform stunned. Many of them couldn't believe what they had just heard. For two students not yet saints to have killed Class 2 magical beasts was unprecedented in the history of Kargath Academy. Afterwards, Tai Ta stowed away his monster cores and walked off the platform. He joined the group of people waiting for Class 2 monster cores evaluations, and stood behind Jian Chen. However, at this point, Tai Ta and Jian Chen had already become the center of everyone's attention, and the people who had failed the task that were currently standing behind them looked at the two with quite a lot of jealousy. There were many of them that had been pathetically running all over the place to escape from the pursuits of Class 1 magical beasts, and they had never imagined that Jian Chen and Tai Ta, who were not at higher levels than them, would manage to not only gain 100 Class 1 monster cores in the second area, but also gain Class 2 monster cores. This made them feel extremely disoriented, and quite a few of the upperclassmen felt embarrassed as well. Soon afterwards, the Class 1 monster cores evaluation ended. The one that had the highest number of monster cores was Jian Chen, with a total of 98 monster cores, while Tai Ta was in second place, with one less monster core. The two of them had many more times monster cores than Mu Tian, who was in third place. Amidst the crowd of people, Mu Tian's eyes flashed in astonishment at Jian Chen and Tai Ta, and he murmured to himself, "Tai Ta, Changyang Xiang Tian, your reputation is well deserved. You two are indeed experts that can defeat saints. I'd love to have a chance to interact with the both of you." Although he had had his spotlight taken away by Jian Chen and Tai Ta, Mu Tian did not show a single trace of dissatisfaction. He was still just as indifferent as before, as if this was an insignificant matter that had absolutely no impact on him. At that moment, Changyang Hu walked up to Jian Chen with a happy expression, and said in a low voice, "Fourth brother, the two of you are really too abnormal. Within 3 days, each of you managed to gain nearly 100 monster cores." Changyang Hu's tone barely concealed his happiness, and he looked at Jian Chen proudly. Jian Chen smiled wordlessly. Suddenly, his gaze shifted as he sensed something. He looked behind him to see a youth with tattered clothes glaring at him with poisonous hatred. The youth's gaze did not bother to conceal his strong killing intent, and it was so severe that Jian Chen could not help but furrow his brows. However, when Jian Chen inspected the youth's appearance a bit more closely, his heart suddenly skipped a beat. The youth was Luo Jian, who had all of his monster cores plundered by Jian Chen. Luo Jian's monster cores had been entirely stolen from him mercilessly, and he had even been heavily injured. Although it did not greatly affect his movements, since he and his group of companions had completely lost all of their battle spirit, they had been unable to gather the energy to steal others' monster cores or hunt magical beasts afterwards. Thus, Luo Jian's group had ended the task with failure. Jian Chen smiled, his expression showing a hint of disdain. He paid absolutely no mind to Luo Jian. In regards to people like Luo Jian, Jian Chen had met many of them as a wanderer in his previous world. However, very few of them had the ability to really stir up storms. The second round of monster core evaluations soon started. The students that had reached saint levels and finished their task walked up to the platform in succession. However, there were two exceptions among them, Jian Chen and Tai Ta, who had not yet reached saint level, while everyone else had. The teacher evaluating the Class 2 monster cores was still the same elder, and the assessment progressed quickly. Because of all the stealing that had occurred in the third region, the several hundred students' monster cores had ultimately been gathered by the 30 to 40 people present. Thus, all of them had much more than 2 monster cores, and many people had over 10 monster cores in their possessions. There were even quite a few people that had gained 23 monster cores. Chapter 51, Class 4 Monster Core, 1, Quickly, over 10 people passed the inspection. At this time, an unusual young man came up. This young man had tattered clothes, but the arrogance between his brows was present as ever. When he came up to the table, he quickly brought out a huge pile of monster cores to place onto the table. The old man in charge of the inspection obviously knew this young man, and after counting the number of monster cores on the table, he said appraisingly, "There are a total of 93 magic cores." "Pretty good, Qingming Xiang, your score is exceptionally good." Hearing Qingming Xiang's name, Tai Ta, who was at the end of the line, looked at Qingming Xiang standing in front of the table, waiting for his evaluation to finish. Tai Ta's eyes were bright with battle spirit. He hadn't been able to forget his last unfinished fight against Qingming Xiang. At that time, he wasn't as strong as he was right now, especially after killing magical beasts in the forest for the past 3 days. Since he had also gained some pointers from Jian Chen, Tai Ta's current fighting abilities were far greater than they had been before. He believed that with his current strength, as well as his newly gained battle experience, he would be able to fully utilize his godly strength in the fight to make up for the difference in saint force between the two of them. There was definitely no way he'd lose to Qingming Xiang. Although Tai Ta appeared to be thick-headed, he clearly understood that this was not the time to spar against Qingming Xiang, so he could only angrily glare at Qingming Xiang's back. Eventually, he managed to suppress his strong desire to fight Qingming Xiang. Hearing the elder's praise, Qingming Xiang smiled, and his eyes showed pride and a hint of arrogance behind them. The appraising elder recorded the value in his notebook, then continued, 93 Class 2 monster cores, huh? If nothing unexpected happens, then you will definitely be part of the top 3 places for Class 2 monster cores. In addition, you are the cultivation genius, so your future is boundless. Keep working hard. Thank you very much for your praise, Teacher Steve. The elder's compliments made Qingming Xiang's arrogant expression even more pronounced. Afterwards, Qingming Xiang returned the Academy space belt and retrieved his own as well as the badge of glory, before stepping off the platform. After Qingming Xiang left, another student with similarly tattered clothes walked up to the table. He directly pulled out a large handful of monster cores. It seemed that he did not have any less monster cores than Qingming Xiang. The appraising elder smiled and nodded, his gaze resting on the youth's face as he slowly said, "Not bad, Huang Dong. It seems that your harvest this time is quite plentiful." Hearing Huang Dong's name, quite a few students below the platform exclaimed in shock. Jian Chen's expression also shifted, his gaze immediately locking onto that youth's figure. Jian Chen was no stranger to Huang Dong's name. His strength was third on Kargath Academy's top 10 experts list. Jian Chen had heard that his power had already reached the peak saint level last year, and he was only one step away from becoming a great saint. In addition, once he successfully broke through, it would signify that he could graduate. Kargath Academy's top 10 experts list referred to the 10 strongest and most formidable students. All of them had already reached peak saint level, and were not far from becoming great saints. Once they broke through, they would leave the top 10 experts circle. In response to the elder's praise, Huang Dong only smiled, and did not reply. Soon, the elder had already finished counting the monster cores on the table. Huang Dong had earned a total of 91 monster cores, 2 less than Qingming Xiang. Once Huang Dong had left the platform, more people from the top 10 experts list appeared on the platform. Almost all of them had numerous monster cores, and the first-ranked student on the top 10 experts list, Bogatti, had a total of 103 monster cores. However, among these top 10 experts, only 4 of them had completed the task. The other 6 had all been eliminated. They had encountered people of the same level as they were, but had lost to the opposite party due to a difference in numbers. Thus, their monster cores had been plundered. Very quickly, all the people on the top 10 experts lists had already left the platform. The people remaining were all extremely well known. At this point, the one who had displayed the highest number of monster cores so far was the first ranked on the top 10 experts list, Bogatti, with a total of 103 monster cores. The person in second place was the fifth ranked, one of the top 10 experts list, Jing Mingyu. She was also the sole female on the top 10 experts list. She had earned a total of 101 monster cores, 2 less than Bogatti had. The person in third place was Cheng Mingxiang, with a total of 93 monster cores. Although he was not on the list of top 10 experts, his power had already reached the upper saint levels, and he was also a higher-ranked elite at Kargath Academy. His abilities were not much lower than the people in the list of top 10 experts, and at Kargath Academy, he had acclaimed the title of the cultivation genius. His cultivation speed was much higher than most people's, and his abilities in battle couldn't be underestimated either. After the 3 of them had left, all the people had already determined the top 3 winners, because the only people left in line were people who were not well known in Kargath Academy. Their powers were all only primary or mid-saint levels, and there was, naturally, no way they could compare to the other 3. Changyang, whose group of 4 had managed to pillage quite a few monster cores thanks to being with Jian Chen. Although the 4 of them had equally split half the cores, each one of them had still managed to get 30 to 40 of them. Even though this did not count as that plentiful of an amount, based on their strengths, this number was already quite good. After all, they were only primary level saints. Very soon, all the saints had already finished their evaluations. Although there were people who had quite a few monster cores, none of them had more than the 3rd place holder. Right now, the only 2 people remaining were Tai Ta and Jian Chen. Currently, both the teachers on the platform and the students below it had their gazes locked onto Jian Chen and Tai Ta. The 2 of them weren't saints yet, but they had reached the level at which they could kill Class 2 magical beasts. This made quite a few people feel intense jealousy and emotions of turmoil. At that moment, everyone was trying to guess how many monster cores were on these 2, who hadn't condensed saint weapons yet. Of course, nobody dared to use the other upperclassmen as a basis for Jian Chen's and Tai Ta's earnings. They all guessed that the 2 of them wouldn't have that many Class 2 monster cores on them. Jian Chen walked up to the appraising elder and removed his space belt. At this moment, the elder was looking at Jian Chen with an expression of praise. The previous prejudices he originally had towards Jian Chen had now completely disappeared. Although he was sure that Jian Chen and Tai Ta would definitely not have more than 10 Class 2 monster cores in their possessions, just the fact that the 2 of them had entered the 3rd region and slayed Class 2 magical beasts without being a saint was already something that the elder had to have a whole new level of respect for. After all, this was the first time non-saints had ever been able to kill Class 2 magical beasts in the history of Kargath Academy. At that moment, the listless teachers sitting on the platform could not help but get excited. One by one, they turned their gaze towards Jian Chen. Jian Chen calmly swept his gaze across the surrounding teachers. When he confirmed that the teachers were staring at him with eyes that were bright with anticipation, his previous indifferent expression could not help a subtle smile. He directly reached into his space belt and removed a handful of Class 2 monster cores and placed them on the table. There seemed to be around 10 of them. After seeing Jian Chen take out the 10 Class 2 monster cores, many of the teachers on the platform had expressions of shock and disbelief. It was very obvious that this number had surpassed most of their expectations. After all, in terms of strength, the difference between Class 2 magical beasts and Class 1 magical beasts was extremely great. Based on their original assumptions, it would have been quite amazing if Jian Chen only had 3 to 4 Class 2 monster cores. However, they hadn't imagined that he would actually have 10 of them. Following this, without waiting for the others' minds to form any more thoughts, Jian Chen once again withdrew a fistful of Class 2 monster cores from his space belt. Currently, the number of Class 2 monster cores on the table had already reached over a dozen in number. This amount was already equal to the number of cores that some of the Saint students had gained the past 3 days. Witnessing this scene, all the teachers on the platform showed incredulous expressions. Even the appraising elder could not help but be shocked speechless at the dozens of monster cores that Jian Chen had pulled out. Although there were only a few dozen Class 2 monster cores, this still made the teachers' emotions surge even more than when Jian Chen had pulled out around 100 Class 1 monster cores in a single breath. After all, these Class 2 monster cores had been pulled out by a person that hadn't reached saint level yet. At that moment, all the teachers suddenly realized that if those dozens of monster cores had been earned by Jian Chen personally killing Class 2 magical beasts, then his future achievements would be When the teachers thought of a student that was not yet a saint killing Class 2 magical beasts, a dozen of them in fact, they could not help but find it incredible. Vice Headmaster Chang Bai-en, who was sitting in the chairperson's spot, had a satisfied smile and murmured, "Not bad, not bad, not bad at all. The only thing that remains unknown is how many of these monster cores you were able to earn by killing magical beasts with your own strength. It seems this will have to be more closely investigated later." After taking out dozens of Class 2 monster cores, Jian Chen's movement still did not stop. His hand once again reached into his space belt and pulled out another handful of monster cores. Afterwards, Jian Chen's movements continued to repeat, and under all the incredulous teacher's shocked gazes, he continued to pull out various sized Class 2 monster cores, until the whole table was completely covered. Seeing the table full of Class 2 monster cores, all the teachers on the platform were stuck in a daze. Even the students below the platform that could see what was going on at the table had expressions of disbelief, as if they had just witnessed an unfathomable scene. The appraising elder inhaled deeply, and tried to quell his emotions of shock as well as he could to calm himself down. The monster cores on the table were ones that he had never in his lifetime seen before, and he had seen many more higher-level monster cores before. Yet these Class 2 monster cores could not be described through ordinary means. The appraising elder looked intensely at Jian Chen before lowering his head to count the monster cores. Soon, the assessment had finished. However, the elder had a shocked expression of disbelief on his face, as his emotions that had just calmed down now began to surge uncontrollably once more. He sat in front of the table in a daze, unable to open his mouth and report the number of monster cores. A few breaths later, the vice headmaster Chang Bai-en sitting in the chairperson's position could finally no longer wait any longer, and said, "Steve, hurry up and report the number of monster cores." Vice Headmaster Bai-en's tone trembled slightly with excitement, although his expression was extremely calm. Hearing the Vice Headmaster's words, the appraising elder took a deep breath, before declaring, "Changyang Xiang Tian, number of Class 2 monster cores gained, 118. Chapter 52, Class 4 Monster Core, 2. After the appraising elder finished his statement, everyone inhaled sharply in shock. The whole arena instantly became so silent, that one would have been able to hear a pin drop. This number made even the vice headmaster Chang Bai-en speechless. His gaze locked onto the huge pile of Class 2 monster cores on the table with an expression of astonishment. This number far surpassed the amount of monster cores that the previous first-place winner, Bogatti, had. A while passed before a student couldn't help but shout out, "No way, that's definitely impossible. How could he, who isn't yet a saint, be able to gain so many monster cores in the third region, and have even way more than the school's top-ranked expert? Bogatti? This is definitely impossible. He definitely brought these monster cores from an outside source." The single input raised a flood of responses. As the student finished speaking, more and more cries of protest rang out. Jian Chen's nearly 100 Class 1 monster cores had already made many people jealous, and had made them feel that it was unfair. Now that he had taken out 118 Class 2 monster cores, which was an amount even greater than his Class 1 monster cores, the students were no longer able to accept it. Under the platform, the currently number 1 expert in Kargath Academy's rankings, Bogatti, was staring at Jian Chen's back in shock as he murmured, "His strength is obviously not yet at saint level. How could he have gotten so many Class 2 monster cores? Could it be that these monster cores really were taken from an outside source?" Bogatti also couldn't help but think the same way as the others. However, this assumption was immediately rejected by him, since before entering the forest, the school administration had completely confiscated all of the students' space equipment, and the students had all gone through very strict inspections. In addition, the forest only had one entrance, so there was no chance for someone to sneak monster cores in from the outside. Moreover, even if someone really did manage to bring them in, Bogatti believed that nobody would be stupid enough to present 100+ Class 2 monster cores at once. That would undoubtedly make the entire school shocked, and the administration would definitely hire people to investigate the situation. Nearby, a gorgeous girl in tattered clothes looked absent-mindedly at Jian Chen's figure on the platform and muttered, "How could that be? A freshman like him who isn't yet a saint actually managed to get 100+ Class 2 monster cores?" The girl's melodious voice was filled with shock and incredulity. On the other side, when he heard the appraising elder announce Jian Chen's monster core amount, Qingming Xiang gaped in shock as he stared disbelievingly at Jian Chen. However, his expression soon became gloomy, and eventually became completely replaced by wrath. This was because the person in third place for the Monster Cores competition received rewards. Although these rewards were not worth that much to those born in major clans, like him, instead it's seen as a great honor, a verification of strength. Originally, Qingming Xiang had been placed as third, but now with Jian Chen in the picture, he had been forcibly pushed out of the top 3. This made him extremely angry. What was even harder to accept was the fact that Jian Chen still wasn't even a saint. Changyang Xiang Tian, shifting his gaze, Qingming Xiang's face became beyond gloomy as he looked at Jian Chen with a glare full of poisonous malice. In the crowd, Luo Jia's expression was equally gloomy. He glared hatefully at Jian Chen, as if he could eat Jian Chen alive with his gaze alone. Although Jian Chen's current strength was still quite weak, his spirit was extremely powerful. Perhaps he wouldn't be able to notice an ordinary gaze, but once a particularly severe gaze was pointed towards him, his soul could immediately detect it. Thus, Luo Jian's and Qingming Xiang's malice-filled glares were immediately sensed by Jian Chen. He turned around and used the aid of his powerful soul to track the glance's sources, and easily found Luo Jian buried in the crowd. Seeing Luo Jian's dark expression, Jian Chen sneered, but did not pay any mind to it. He had swiped all of Luo Jian's monster cores from him, forcing him to fail the task. In addition, Jian Chen had injured Luo Jian as well, so it was completely normal for Luo Jian to hate Jian Chen so much. However, as Jian Chen's vision shifted towards Qingming Xiang, his brows furrowed as he showed a helpless expression. He didn't have any enmity with Qingming Xiang. The previous incident in front of the library was so minor that it couldn't have been the cause of such fierce hatred. The main reason was the fact that Jian Chen had forcibly pushed Qingming Xiang out of the top 3. After all, being able to place as the top 3 among the entire academy was an achievement that was an extreme glory. This was especially true for those born in noble clans, as this honor could directly increase their status by a large amount. If it were any of the top 10 experts that had pushed Qingming Xiang out of the first 3 places, he definitely wouldn't have felt unhappy at all. However, since the one who had forced Qingming Xiang out of the top 3 wasn't even on the top 10 list, he was also only a freshman who did not even reach the saint level yet, causing Qingming Xiang, Kargath Academy's cultivation genius, to feel humiliated. He couldn't imagine that a freshman that had just entered the school would end up reaching his level, and from this feeling, a hatred towards Jian Chen was born. Although there was also Tai Ta, who was the headmaster's apprentice, and thus had a greater power behind him than Qingming Xiang had. Of course, Qingming Xiang wouldn't dare to casually offend the headmaster. The appraising elder took a deep breath, forcing himself to calm down. He looked at Jian Chen profoundly, and smiled. "Changyang Xiang Tian, you've really made me shocked. I hadn't imagined that someone like you who isn't yet a saint could actually gain so many Class 2 monster cores. You've already far surpassed the previous first place, Bogati. It seems that this competition's first place has definitely been taken by you." The elder handed Jian Chen his own space belt and the badge of glory. Jian Chen laughed, and reached out to accept the items. Teacher's words are too much. Nobody can say yet who first place will be. After all, Tai Ta is still behind me. The number of monster cores he has is not any less than me. Saying this, Jian Chen restowed all of the monster cores into his space belt. Hearing Jian Chen's words, the elder shot Jian Chen a deep glance, and he smiled wordlessly. After Jian Chen had completely stored away all of the Class 2 monster cores on the table, he directly walked off the platform. Afterwards, Tai Ta walked up to the table, and began to take out his own Class 2 monster cores from his space belt. Tai Ta had entered the 3rd region with Jian Chen, and they had equally distributed the monster cores. Thus, he had pretty much exactly the same amount of monster cores Jian Shen had. After the appraising elder finished counting, it was revealed that Tai Ta had a total of 119 Class 2 monster cores, only one more than Jian Shen. After the appraising elder announced Tai Ta's total amount of monster cores, all of the people at the arena were once again shocked speechless. Below the platform, the fifth-ranked person on Kargath Academy's top 10 experts, Jing Mingyu, was in a daze. From the look in her eyes, it seemed as if she had lost her spirit. She had suddenly been forced out of second place by two freshmen. This result was difficult for her to accept. After all, she had spent a lot of energy and effort earning those monster cores. She couldn't imagine how the two newly entered non-saint freshmen could have gotten so many monster cores. At that moment, an extremely beautiful girl walked up to Jing Mingyu, and intimately hugged her arms around Jing Mingyu's waist. Laughing, she said, "Sister Jing, you hadn't imagined that you would have been forced down from second place by two new freshmen, right?" Jing Mingyu sighed, and bitterly smiled. "It's really unfathomable. Those two freshmen haven't even reached saint level, and yet they were able to gain so many monster cores. The two of them even forced Kargath Academy's #1 expert, Bogati, down to third place. I really have no clue how they got their hands on so many monster cores. Could it really be possible that they had brought them in from outside?" The girl giggled in response. "Sister Jing, you've guessed wrongly. I believe that those Class 2 monster cores were earned from their own strength, not from outside as you suspect." The girl's words made Jing Mingyu start. Jing Mingyu turned around and glanced doubtfully at the girl, and asked in a curious tone, "Shaolo, why do you say that?" The girl smiled mysteriously, as she showed a prideful expression. In a low voice, she said, "Sister Jing, I encountered those two in the second region, and even stayed with them for an entire day. You cannot underestimate them, they're both very formidable. Especially that Changyang Xiang Tian. He managed to kill quite a few Class 1 magical beasts with a lousy iron rod by piercing them directly through the throat." "Really?" Jing Mingyu asked in shock, obviously not believing it. "Of course, I saw it with my own eyes. There's no way it'd be false." The girl puffed out her chest and said firmly, "Also, that night, we encountered a secret attack from 20+ blue wolves. The two of them effortlessly killed all of them." "What? You said that the two of them managed to kill 20+ blue wolves by themselves?" Hearing this, Jing Mingyu could no longer hide her shock. Although she was already a high-level saint, she would still flee if she faced 20+ Class 1 magical beasts, let alone kill them. The girl vigorously nodded and said, "That's right, Sister Jing. I personally witnessed it. Although Changyang Xiang Tian and Tai Ta haven't condensed their saint weapons, their strength is definitely not any weaker than a saint's. That's why I can promise that the monster cores in their hands are definitely not brought in from the outside." Hearing this, Jing Mingyu lowered her head and thought it over seriously. Despite the fact that Jian Shen and Tai Ta had forced her out of the top 3 places, she didn't show a trace of dissatisfaction in her expression. From this alone, it could be seen that Jing Mingyu was not a narrow-minded person. After the evaluation had finished, the awards ceremony began. This time, the event's top 3 places for both Class 1 monster cores and Class 2 monster cores would receive the same rewards. The first place reward was a Class 4 monster core and a Medal of Honor completely made from purple coins. Both second place and third place rewards included one Class 3 monster core, and a Medal of Honor made from gold coins. These medals weren't worth much money, but what they represented was of extraordinary significance. Thus, even the nobles that had powerful backgrounds couldn't keep their eyes from reddening at those medals of honor. Jian Shen and Tai Ta had taken the first 2 places for both Class 1 monster cores and Class 2 monster cores, and thus earned twice the amount of rewards. Third place for Class 1 monster cores was still Mu Tian, and third place for Class 2 monster cores was Kargath Academy's #1 expert, Bogati. After the award ceremony had finished, Jian Shen could not help but smile excitedly at the surging, pure power in the Class 4 monster core he held in his hand. With the Class 4 monster core, as well as the 200+ monster cores in his space belt, he had enough to last him for a long time. Based on Jian Chen's calculations, he wouldn't have to worry about not having monster cores to use for at least a year. You're tuning in to the Biyao's Wuxia Chronicles YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.